Hello, comrades. Good evening, comrades. Now, remember, on Socialism Saturday, we are not comrades on this channel, but what we are, if I can get my banner working, what we are is comrades. So welcome, welcome. Mount that like button if you are ready for some socialism tonight. Now, I've been on a little kick lately in terms of obviously watching socialism content. I don't know. We've been watching a lot lately. I understand Socialism Saturday doesn't feel quite as special when we are watching socialism throughout the week. I have to admit that I was telling people in my Bitchcraft call earlier today, I was telling people, like, this for me, coming across this plethora of socialism, like legitimately socialist videos on YouTube, for me, it's fascinating. I'm on a little bit of a bender with it. We might be watching a little bit of it for a minute. And the reason for that is I feel like, I feel like I've always been fascinated with dystopian fiction, whether that be like books or movies or what have you. I'm sure many of you are fascinated by dystopian fiction as well, even though it doesn't really seem like fiction anymore, does it? It is like watching this content for me is like staring into an alternate universe, a dystopian movie, except it's real life. a little crazy. Well, guys, on Socialism Saturday, we do watch real socialists, not CNN socialists. When I say real socialists, this is not like conservatives going, everyone is a socialist and Marxism, where that's not what we're talking about. That's not what we're talking about. We are talking about real life socialists, people who believe that the USSR was a good thing, that are extolling the virtues of the Russian Revolution, that don't really mind what China's doing at all, that want to get rid of capitalism entirely. And the reason that we watch this is because these people are winning. They're winning. They are winning. They are driving the agenda. What these people said 5 years ago is now making its way into the talking points of the Democratic Party. So tonight, I wanted to do something that I think is a little bit special. I wanted to go back because the socialist content that we've watched in the last week or so, it's been extremely recent. Last Saturday, we were literally live streaming a socialist conference in Chicago while it was happening live. We've watched content from within the last couple of weeks. Okay, so the content that we have been watching is really new content. What we're going to do tonight is old. We're going back 5 years. I really want. I gotta tell you guys. I told my Bitchcraft community today. I was like, I had so many options for what we could watch tonight. I was so overwhelmed by choice. We almost didn't have Socialism Saturday today because I was like, there are just too many options. I don't know how to choose. What should we watch? And I think I settled on the perfect one. I think it's good. And tonight we are going to be watching from 5 years ago. From 5 years ago, November 10th, 2016. Maybe that's almost 6 years ago. Almost 6 years ago. Okay, so immediately after Donald Trump got elected, days after Donald Trump won the 2016 election, this was put on YouTube. Trump's America and Anti-Fascist Organizing within days of the election. This is Antifa. We're watching Antifa organize right in front of us. This is put on by a legitimately socialist publisher, Verso Books. So if you guys remember back but a couple of days ago, when we watched that crazy video of that woman who wants to get rid of the family and have all children be born via surrogacy. And I said to you guys, if you donate to my Schools Exposed campaign, I will buy the Surrogacy Now book and read it for you so you don't have to. That surrogacy book is published by this publisher. This is a legitimately socialist book publisher that wants all children to be born via surrogacy, just like in Brave New World or 1984. So, days after Donald Trump was elected president in 2016, they have this 2-hour stream, Trump's America and Anti-Fascist Organizing. And so what I want to do tonight, and I'm going to need all your help, because I ain't doing this alone. Socialism Saturday is not just about me. It is about all of us. What I want to do tonight is I want to watch this presentation and I want to talk about what came true. What did these people plan just days after Donald Trump got elected, before he was even in office? What came true? What did they implement? What talking points are we going to hear in this stream that today are the talking points that we hear on CNN or of the Democratic Party? This is not just about having a glimpse into the mind of insane people. That's not what this is. This is about seeing how those insane people have organized, have rallied, have focused around a goal, and have actually taken their little movement, because we're not talking about a lot of people here. We always need to keep this in mind. We're not talking about a lot of people. But these are the people that are driving culture. These are the people that are shifting the Overton window in their direction. So we need to learn from them. We need to take their tactics. We need to utilize what they are doing and turn it against them. Otherwise, we're all going to become socialists, and I don't want to be a socialist. I don't know about you guys. I like capitalism. I really like capitalism. I'm good at capitalism. I've built several businesses. So I want to know what they're doing and I want to know what's effective. And yes, Incognito says a shot for each idea that comes to fruition. I do have some beer with me because God knows I ain't watching this sober. And I strongly recommend that all of you get your beverage of choice as well. Phil, I do not have a Socialism Saturday bingo card yet, but if we want to start putting together some words, I can make a bingo card that we can use, especially on Socialism Saturdays. I think that'd be a pretty great idea, actually. Maybe we can use this. Yep, obviously breaking the fluff. Restarters are the problem. Welcome to the bustling metropolis of Manch Vegas. I'm sure they love having you. So, guys, that's what we're doing tonight. We are watching this presentation. It is 2 hours long. 2 hours. I don't know if we're going to make it through the whole thing. We'll give it our best shot. And again, what I want to start out with, what I really want to do tonight. Oh, I got to get my little banner off the screen because we're already enjoying the communism. Hang on. Remember, comrades, what I want to do tonight is I want to watch this presentation and pay close attention to what came true. What came true. But before we get into that, we got a couple of things. Now, just so you guys know, speaking of dystopian, tomorrow night in my supporter Discord, we will be having movie night and we will be watching Demolition Man. We will be having movie night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. If you would like to join us in the supporter Discord, there are a couple ways that you can do it. Now, if you are in my locals, or in my Patreon, or on one of my Substacks as a paid supporter, or you have given to the Schools Exposed campaign, you should have already received a link to my supporter Discord. If you have not received that link yet, I will be sending them out tomorrow. But if you are not currently a supporter and you want to come to movie night tomorrow to watch this movie and have a discussion with my community, there are a couple ways you can do that. Number one, you can become a member on Patreon, on locals, or on Substack. And by member, I don't just mean signing up for the free stuff. I mean signing up for the paid account. I can't do this work without the support of my community. I'm very, very grateful for the support of my community. And, I understand that not everyone can afford to join, but I do try to keep options open for everyone. Patreon, we have options for $5 a month, all the way up to $250 a month. With some of those options, you get kind of cool swag, like this cool shirt. I love this shirt of the Mad Hatter giving the red pill. That's at the $25 a month level, but you don't need to go up to that level if you don't want to. $5 a month will get you into the supporter Discord. If you don't want to give via Patreon, I totally get it. Patreon sometimes cancels people. I really do understand. That's why I have locals as an option. With locals, you can join for $5 a month as a supporter. You can join for $50 a year, or you can make a one-time gift, whatever works for you. And that will get you not only access to my locals community and my community Zooms and all the perks and the bitchcraft, just like we did today, it will also get you access to the supporter Discord. On Substack, you have to join as a paid supporter. All of my Substack articles are free on both Actively Unwoke and the Red Pill Diaries. But if you become a paid supporter, you're going to get access to the supporter Discord. You can find this information at activelyunwoke.com/support. And if that's not enough options for you, I got one more. I'm currently running a crowdfunding campaign to try to train 10,000 parents how to find out what the schools are teaching their kids. We have actually met our initial funding goal, but I would really like a marketing budget. Marketing budget would be pretty great because the more of a marketing budget I have, the more parents I'm going to be able to get into this program quickly once it launches in January. If you would like to support the work I'm doing there, you get access to a variety of perks, to include early access to the program. You could be one of the first people to run through it. You can get that for $50. You can also get a scholarship for someone and a spot for yourself. $50, $90 for that, but that gets you a spot for you and a scholarship for someone else. You can get signed copies of my book. You can get private training with me. You can get me to investigate your school for you, or at the $1,000 level, I will actually custom knit you a hand knit shawl. I'm starting a new shawl tonight. I don't know how the colors are going to go just yet. We're going to work this out, but I will knit you a shawl of your very own. We'll pick out the colors, we'll pick out the yarns, and you will get something that no one else in the world has. People who've been following me for the past couple of years know that I do not sell my knitting ever. This is going to be the first time. And so if you really want something knitted by me, this might actually legitimately be your only opportunity because I don't like making knitting a job, but I will do it for you guys if I can get this program a marketing budget, and I really appreciate that. So all of that information is in the description below if you would like to take advantage. And the last order of business I need to do for right now is I need a beer. And we didn't have happy hour yesterday because I was really busy. I was running around. I had to do a candidate night for the LPNH. So I wasn't able to do happy hour. So we're going to bring happy hour into our Socialism Saturday. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you about the beers that I have, and then I'm going to put a poll in the chat, and you guys are going to tell me which beer I should start out with. For those who don't come to my regular happy hours on my second channel, youtube.com/actively unwoke, we do them on Fridays at 5 p.m. normally. And I basically drink really good craft beer and we watch a woke training and talk about it. Very similar to what we're doing tonight. Usually not socialism, but we're going to do something similar. So let me grab my beer from my little cooler that I have on the floor here and we can talk about it. And then, yes, bot, you get to vote. Because we're still doing some form of democracy. It's tyranny of the majority because you guys are going to force me to drink a beer that maybe I wouldn't have chosen, but we're going to do it anyway because I picked out all 4 beers that I'm going to show you. All right, let's see what we got. I just got back from the beer store. It is nice and cold. Now, the first one, I had to get this for the can. Look at this. Pink Floyd. I had to. This is a strawberry pink lemonade sour ale. That's option number 1. Hang on, let me make the poll in the chat. Which beer should I start with? And our first one is Pink Floyd. So creative. People are so creative. Now, the next one, check this out. Holy Donut. And this is also a sour ale with lemon zest, donuts, lemon puree, vanilla extract, and lactose. I don't know what it means when it says it has donuts in the beer. I don't know how you put a donut in a beer, but they tried. So we're going to call that the lemon donut beer. Next option. Now, of course, I have to have a pumpkin option. I had to. Today we have Pumpkin Party Pumpkin Ale from Lone Pine Brewing. I love pumpkin beer, but some pumpkin beer is good and some pumpkin beer is not so good. I don't know how this beer is because I've never had it before. So we're just going to call that the pumpkin beer. And then lastly, and please don't make me start with this. You can do what you want, but please don't make me start with this. This is called Das Hydra. And this is a sour ale with blackberry puree, raspberry puree, lemon puree, marshmallow, graham cracker, and granola. Das Hydra. We're going to call that Hydra. All right, guys, poll in the chat on YouTube. Let me know which beer you would like me to start with. And while you guys are voting and, of course, mounting that like button, I'm going to get set up to do this here stream. I'm putting my fate in your hands, guys. I am. All right. Let me get this set up while you guys are registering your choices. There are no wrong answers except Das Hydra. Because I don't want to start with... I'm not saying I don't want to drink it. I'm just saying I don't want to start with it. If you would be... Like, if you want to be mean, we can. But, like... I might get really silly really quickly if we start with Das Hydra. We'll see how that goes. Yeah, 21% of you can go fuck yourselves. I knew, Phil, I knew it. I knew it. I knew it. Reagan chose lemon. I'm excited. I'm excited to try the lemon beer. I'm excited to try all of them. No, Phil, you were already that guy, okay? I know you were drinking earlier today, so you're I'll forgive you. It's fine. It's fine. Incognito, stop being a troublemaker. All right, guys, I'm closing down the votes in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and ding, 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 ding. Pink Floyd it is. See, you guys are so good to me. That's one of the ones I would have chosen either that or lemon to start with. Because when you're drinking like this type of beer, you want like a nice progression. Okay, I haven't had anything to drink yet today, so I wanted to start a little bit later. All right, Pink Floyd it is. Thank you, Phil. A super chat for Hydra. We'll drink Hydra. Well, maybe tonight. I mean, it's a 2-hour stream, so I conceivably could go through all 4 beers tonight. We'll have to see. Let's see if this really is pink. Cheers, everyone. Happy Friday. If you're or Saturday. Gosh, I skipped a whole day. Happy Saturday. It does look like pink lemonade, doesn't it? If you're drinking something fun tonight, let us know what it is. Cheers to you. It really does taste like pink lemonade. It does. It does. All right, guys. Mount that like button if you're ready to start Socialism Saturday. Let's do it. 2 hours. We can do it. And remember, I need your looking around. I can't do all the work myself. If you hear them say something that has come in within the last 6 years, note it in the chat. Because again, we are watching, for those who just joined, we are watching a presentation from right after Trump got elected. He wasn't even in office yet. They were already organizing against him before he even did anything. This is literally Antifa. This is the real deal, okay? So let's listen and let's discover what they did and note specifically what things they say in this video that have since come true. All right, let's do it.
Okay. Thank you all for coming out on such last minute notice. I wish we could be here under better circumstances. For many waking up today, they were plagued with a sense of despair, confusion, and hopelessness. For many others, however, it was a moment of empowerment for the politics they believed was dead, if not already dying. And when such moments of political polarization become almost impossible to ignore, it's important and crucial for us to avoid simplistic analysis and move forward for the fight for justice.
This was in 2016,
as pointed out in today's
so this is way before coronavirus.
Worker, Clinton and Sanders and much of the rest of political establishment, Republicans included, criticized Trump's ugly outrages. But because they never acknowledged the real economic grievances that he built around his campaign, they left many a way clear for Trump to channel legitimate bitterness into scapegoating and scaremongering. But to see the rise of Donald Trump having arrived out of left field would be a grave mistake. There are serious lessons to be learned, to be discussed, and to be organized around. The 2016 elections from its very start represented a catastrophic blow to working class women, communities of color, immigrants, Muslims, LGBTQ populations, and Global South more broadly. Donald Trump's presidency is no longer a laughing matter for the liberal media, since it's now become an American political reality. It cannot and should not be underestimated or taken lightly. For these reasons, Verso Book has organized a flash forum to process aloud and with each other the implications of such a presidency and ways to prepare the ground for the work that needs to be done. We're extremely lucky to have an amazing panel with us today. We have Muna Mir, an activist and a writer for publications such as The Nation, Vice, Elle Magazine, The New Inquiry, and Youngest. We also have Bhaskar Sunkara, the founding editor of Jacobin Magazine.
Listen to the organization.
Nichols is the national affairs correspondent at The Nation and author of The S Word.
That's
Ken
nice.
Chen is a poet and executive director of the Asian American Writers Workshop and a co-founder of Culture Strike. Donna Murch, who will be arriving shortly, is an associate professor of history at Rutgers University and the author of Living for the City, Migration, Education, and the Rise of the Black Panther Party in Oakland, California. Mariam Jamshidi is a lawyer and a writer with over 10 years of experience working on issues relating to the Middle East and North Africa, and is also the founding editor-in-chief of Mufta.org. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to John Nichols.
He is.
I want to thank Andy Shao, who's someplace way back, and all the folks from Verso for putting this together. It's actually a really good idea because people are incredibly engaged right now. They're thinking about it. They're talking about it. And one of the things that's striking to me is that electoral politics in this country is usually unworthy of serious consideration. But in this circumstance, it has thrown us a ringer that we're going to have to all deal with. And so we've got a group of people together here who will I'm just going to go around and we're going to take just some quick comments from folks. And then we're going to go very quickly.
He's the editor at The Nation,
which will be as smart and good as anything that we say. And so I think, there's no logical place to begin here, except with the reality that Donald Trump won the presidency. And I don't think too many people expected that was going to happen. It's kind of nice when we get surprised. It's just better when it's a good surprise. And so I think I'm going to start with Miriam. You talk a lot about the conditions in the Middle East, but also obviously very conscious of conditions for Muslim Americans. And if there's one group that Donald Trump has, really, and it's a long list, let's be honest. But if there's a group that throughout this campaign, he has come back to again and again and again, it is Muslims. Mm-hmm. And in fact, the most remarkable thing, and I thought it was really stupid, obviously he had a strategy. On Saturday, he went to Minneapolis, altered his campaign speech entirely to talk about Somali Americans in the community with the largest Somali American population. A last stage structural political act designed to shift the politics of a state by picking on Muslims. And so I think I'm just asking you what you think about that. And how are we going to, if this is how he did his campaign, and we presume that he doesn't sound, this is a very tenuous, very vulnerable moment for a community that's been in this country since before this was a country.
Yeah, that is all correct. I will say one thing as like maybe a point of hope, that there is now, I think, the first Somali American legislative official.
Omar.
Yes, from Minnesota.
In fact, she won from a district just up the road from where Trump appeared.
Right. Yeah. So if that.
Oh, they're Ilhan Omar fans.
That happened despite his comments. I think that a lot of the sort of questions and debates that I've seen happen over the course of the last 24 hours have focused on, trying to diagnose the problem. What happened here? What went wrong? What was he able to do that the Democrats weren't able to counter? And a lot of that has focused on the questions of the economy, jobs, class issues, right? But obviously, there was a lot of rhetoric around race, religion, immigration. And I think we need to grapple with, honestly, the fact that played a very important role in the fact that he won this election. Unfortunately, I don't see us really grappling with that. And it's important not only to understand what happened, right? But as I said, to sort of you need to diagnose the problem accurately in order to be able to move forward, to be able to cure the disease. And if the reason this happened is because racism and xenophobia has an extremely strong populist strength in this country among a certain demographic, then those who are trying to push back in the next election in 2018 are going to have to grapple with and understand, is it about winning over the white working class voters, or is it about something else? Is it about building alliances, building strength, really speaking to the concerns of the minority communities, of the marginalized communities, of the people who are not the ones who voted for Donald Trump, but also are not marginalized minorities? Is that where you do your coalition building, or is it somewhere else? I mean, American Muslims right now are too small to matter.
About 6 million population of 300.
1%. Yeah. Very small. They are not going to be able to push back against the inevitable racism, hate crimes, you name it, that are going to continue to happen against them over the course of the next few years, perhaps longer. We've already been dealing with it. building that coalition moving forward in terms of votes also needs to take into consideration how to actually do important work with communities like this that are very isolated right now. It's not so much just about bringing them into the electoral process, they're largely already there, but it's also about building a foundation for a set of values that are now have been completely trounced upon.
Let's take just one more second on this, that there's something distinct about being a community that there's evidence can be a political tool that works. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a scary, to be a community that can be targeted and that can work politically, at least to some extent. What, to the extent you can, we'll have some critique of media tonight. That's easy. But what does the left, what do progressives need?
I am Carlin on Getter, Karlyn.
Community that
also on Gab, True Social Minds.
That there are going to be people who see as a tool that they can play and that they can work with, as Trump has proven. What does the left need to get right now, and how might it respond in some effective ways?
I mean, I'd like to think that the left, understands what it means to be in solidarity with a community, but just in case there's confusion about that, I think that right now in particular, it's really, it's a very small thing, but it's actually not as small as you might think. It has become very socially accepted to say terrible things about Muslims, right? What is even more problematic about it is that very few people actually say anything when it happens, right? So the comments get made, and at best you have silence. And there's that Martin Luther King quote, which I'm going to butcher. The silence of your friends, right? So I think as a starting point, and I don't even think we're there yet, as a starting point, I think that the left needs to step up in terms of speaking out against this phenomenon, which has become almost a cause célèbre amongst anybody who.
The left needs to step up in terms of speaking out against this Trump hate crime phenomenon. I think we can assess that came true. The left certainly did step up in terms of speaking out.
Wants to
in ways that I think many of us find, well, a little problematic, but beside the point, it came true.
To sort of run in an election. We see it everywhere. I mean, even the things Hillary Clinton was saying were problematic. The Muslim community. I mean, so there are a couple of things, right? They're speaking out.
They're always very useful if you needed somebody
exactly.
to report
the
on
Muslim
something.
Community has a utility, right? Like those are the arguments that liberals.
Do you know how we can tell these people are socialists? They don't like Hillary Clinton. They don't like the Democrats. These people are not, we are probably not going to hear a lot of complimentary things about the Democratic Party in this, because the real socialists hate the Democratic Party.
Make, we should be nice to the Muslims because we could really use their help right now to finger other Muslims that are doing bad things. So one is getting away from that narrative, which hopefully is obvious to everyone as to why it's a destructive one, right? Because it plays into the Muslims are all terrorists and responsible for all terrorism that happens in this country. But in addition to that, there needs to be more proactive efforts to speak out against all of it, right? Not just to not engage in the narrative, but when you hear the narrative being spoken, say something, do something. And it doesn't have to be you could happen at the meta level, but it could also happen on the micro level. I can't tell you how many.
Hang on. It's easy to speak out when they control the majority of the legacy media. It's easy to speak out regardless. You do not need the media to speak out. You do not need to control anything to speak out. All you need is your own voice. I'm sure you probably didn't mean it this way, Stevie, but I do not accept this. I do not accept this excuse that I see coming from the right over and over and over. Everyone censors us. Everyone silences us. No. Stop making excuses for why you can't speak out. Every single person watching this is capable of doing every single thing that every single person in this video that we're watching is doing. No one is a victim here. No one is oppressed here. We are not playing into this. If you want to speak out, speak out. But if you don't want to speak out, then stop blaming other people for why you aren't.
Any Muslims have been horrified at just, having a microaggression happen to them in a very public place and having nobody come to their help.
Thank you. Moon, you reported on Ferguson, and you've reported on a lot of communities that have risen up and pushed back. During this campaign, Trump used that pushback again as a tool for reaching out to voters and potentially to dividing folks. When you watch this campaign, I'm interested in whether you thought that would work as it was progressing. Did you whether you anticipated that it would be potentially successful, and what, again, as we were talking there, what can we do, or what should we be doing to make sure that we don't contribute to the success of that seemingly very effective divisive pivot, or whatever we call it?
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah. So I think the common refrain
if someone
here
wants to
is
look her up on
around,
Twitter and see what she's saying now, that might be really helpful.
Black
Bot.
people are people of color, and the prospect
I'm just
of a
saying,
riot
Bot. If
or
you
of
wanted to do
looting,
that, Bot, that'd be really helpful, Bot.
that seems to be something that we return to over and over again. I'd like to point out that when a team lost the Stanley Cup, the city of Vancouver was trashed, completely burned.
Thank you, Bot.
And we didn't see that pushback then. We don't see that used as any sort of political tool. And this is a tool that people have returned to.
I'm not
over
saying
and
she
over
has
again,
to. I'm just saying it would
if
be
we look
helpful.
at sort of the arc of history and how these things have played out. I think this is something that, if you think through the narrative,
she just strikes me as someone
Black
that's going to be
people and
trouble.
people of color as violent. If you think through, respectability and notions of nonviolence, there's a way in which we don't see people's humanity. There's a way in which we don't understand sort of the emotional landscape of being under this yoke or the boot of white supremacy.
They think they're the ones under the boot
valuing
instead of the ones
property
in the
over
shoe.
human lives is something that we need to push back against.
Very central, though, to so much of our politics.
Of course she does.
Absolutely.
I told you she was going to be trouble. I knew it.
Someone's
I
dead
can
in the
sniff
street,
this shit out.
lying there for 4 hours, and the conversation revolves around a Quick Trip burning, right? So it's difficult. It's difficult to say, Black Lives Matter is critical, but I think in some ways we need to push past that narrative specifically and maybe focus more on how we devalue Black lives specifically. Like, what are we saying that is, what are we saying that allows us to devalue certain lives, and how does that sort of play out?
Now, keep in mind, guys, again, just for those of you who have just joined, the presentation we are watching was given like 2 days after Donald Trump won the election in 2016. So this is pre-pandemic. This is pre-George Floyd. This is pre-2020 Black Lives Matter riots. The reason that we are watching this is to see how many things they said in this presentation have come real since then. And if you hear something that they said back 2 days after Donald Trump won in 2016, this is November 10th of 2016. If you hear them say something that that sounds like it has come true since then, please chat it in and let us know. Apparently, she really hates the Queen. Well, she don't need to deal with her anymore. The Queen is dead. Long live the King. Queen was great, though. Anyone who hates the Queen is a fascist.
What is that mechanism specifically?
Well, Trump actually seemed to feed off. This was a complexity. He liked the protests at his rally. He liked to point to folks and say, get them out. And that actually became a meme of his campaign. And so it becomes, as we talk about how we push back against this in a way, and protest and challenge, And
Why do they
don't
have
feed
18 cups
into-
on that table? There are only 5 of them. Why are
Don't
there
give him
18
tools,
cups on the
I don't
table?
know, for like,
Yeah.
think about it. Give us a little
What's
thought
in
on
those
that.
cups?
I think that Ava DuVernay did a
seriously
great
asking.
job with this in the
You have done
13th.
some very good.
Right, who I interviewed briefly for Elle. So in her movie, The 13th, this fantastic documentary that everyone should see, there is a really great scene where she shows archival footage of a journalist in Chicago whose name is escaping me, being shoved by white supremacists violently. This journalist came, I think, to report on Jim Crow and racial segregation, and was met
I knew
with,
she was trouble.
violent white hostility, hands on his body, just like being shoved down the street. She juxtaposes this image with an image that is, eerie in how parallel it is, of a protester being shoved at a Trump rally, right? And he basically, he does feed off of it. And his line is, going back to the good old days and how we used to handle Black people in the good old days.
I've literally never heard
With
Trump say
brute
anything
violence.
like that.
I mean, not that we don't.
Has
face
anyone heard
brute
Trump say
violence
anything like
now,
that?
But with uncloaked violence. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's really effective to show that history sort of loops in on itself and it's recursive, right? Like it tends to ebb and flow the way that we think about a certain kind of violence, a certain kind of violent mechanism of white supremacy. And I think that we can think through this moment as a backlash, right? Which a lot of, critics pointed out last night. Reconstruction happened, and right after Reconstruction, after the election of how many Black senators, there was an intense backlash in the form of, the birth of Jim Crow. And we can see that now with, the first Black president, however problematic he may have been, it was
They didn't like
a
Obama.
milestone. And
They didn't
this
like
is
Obama. Socialist.
sort of the way that white America's anxieties are answering that.
And we have this pattern in America, as you referenced with Reconstruction, but also much more recently. Mm-hmm. The progress of the late 50s, early 1960s, followed by Nixon, the creation of the term backlash, George Wallace, a great antecedent, but also in the wonderful solidarity, not so much on issues of race, but the wonderful solidarity of certain periods during World War II, followed by McCarthyism, and saying, no, let's not get too close. Let's not find our common ground. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, let's say, Brent Kenyon, we know this pattern, we know the pushback. How come we're not better at dealing with it? I mean, I'm talking about us. Yeah. I mean, why aren't we, because we do see it happen, what aren't we learning, or is this in the DNA so much that no matter what we learn, it's going to happen?
That's a very big and open-ended question, but I have a few ideas. I mean, so I do a lot of cultural events. I'm writing a book where I hallucinate about going to the underworld and visiting the colonialist, history of the world. And my immediate response, aside from dread and fear and sleeplessness and things like that, was thinking oh, I have to drop this art shit, and we're gonna go and do programs with alternative labor centers, unions. We're gonna do
alternative labor centers.
What
does that
Skype
mean?
In political education to people in Michigan, or figure out some kind of programs that actually matter, that have real politics. We'll revive this pre-World War II, pre-McCarthyist left class and race solidarity.
A popular front.
Going back to the popular front and the cultural front. And then I had to take a step back and be well, actually, everyone in this room is feeling fear and dread and nervousness and concern about volatility of the future. And the thing that makes Trump so amazing is, and I think we disagree on this, exceptional, is his anti-institutional mastery of cultural imaginations. And I'm kind of weird because I'm kind of an artist who is sort of against culture as politics sometimes.
Smart.
But I have been thinking
Pay
a lot
attention to
about
this
how
one. He gets it. He gets it on a deeper level than those
what
first
it
two.
means for us to elect a Republican who, in many ways, a lot of his critiques during the debates of Hillary were critiques from the left, like anti-TPP, anti-Goldman Sachs.
But let me just.
They're like, no, don't say that. They're cutting him off because they don't like what he's saying.
Trump's closing ad, the 2-minute ad across America. He
like, Trump is not on the left. What are you talking about? Trump couldn't possibly be on the left.
He said, it's not about me, it's about us. We are the movement. There was, I bet I counted at least a half dozen phrases that come from the left.
Yeah. And I think
talking about multinational corporations and the whole thing. Yeah.
Well, a lot of his things, there were lines that could have been said by Elizabeth Warren. And then you get to the next part.
Bernie Sanders.
And then you get to the next line, which is about like deporting all Muslims or something like that. But the line before that is about tax deduction for childcare for families, you know. And I think the thing to think about is like
guy,
leading up to the election when you see.
I don't know why this guy was included on this panel, but I'm going to bet you he was never included on another panel that these people put together again. Remember, they put this together like last minute. They put this together in like 2 days. So I'm going to bet that they did not expect this guy to come in and be like, yeah, Trump attacked Hillary Clinton from the left. Did you guys notice that when he did that, they were like, no, but let me just remind you of these other things that Trump said that were not from the left. He's like, no, Trump attacked Hillary Clinton from the left. So like, this guy is not a true believer. This guy is probably a lefty. He's already told us like he's a creative. He really, this guy is not Trump deranged, is I guess what I'm saying. He might be on the left, but he is not deranged. He is looking at the situation with clearer eyes than anyone else we've heard from yet. So let's really pay attention to what Ken is saying on this panel and see how they react to it. And I what I want to see is, does he kind of change his tune over the course of the panel? Because it could be that he gets social signals from these people being like, they're going to subtly send him like indicators being like, you're not supposed to say that. Is he going to adjust his messaging? Is my question, because he's obviously the most plugged in person that we've heard from so far.
Like Hillary's ads where like Hillary is your abuela, you know, like everyone laughed at that because there was no way where Hillary could genuinely,
I bet they stopped calling on him.
Public that we all believe that we were a part of. It was brazenly a coalition of different interests. Yeah. And Trump was sort of a master of creating a public, like he imagined a community that people could see themselves in. And that community was white people voting through white ethnic identity. And
he brought it back.
His racial politics.
They only voted for Trump because he's a Nazi. They really are
ingrained in American settler colonialist project, which is not like, he had some law and order stuff that was anti-black, but a lot of it was undocumented immigrants and Muslims will kill you. The enemy from the outside and the enemy from the inside. And I bet a lot of you caught Giuliani talking about how this is the best political victory since Andrew Jackson.
Yeah, I'll thank you to refer to him as the future Attorney General.
Yes, yeah. Who I believe said that he's going to crack down on Black Lives Matter activists also.
Oh God, if they only knew that what happened to Giuliani was going to be much worse than being Attorney General. If they only knew.
General. Yeah. But stick with that. Keep us going on that for one more second before we bring Oscar. This appropriation of the language, the movement language of the left, to build a movement that seeks to divide people and that ultimately gets to that place. Is somebody who thinks so much about culture and thinks so much about language, is there something that we can learn about how should we think about that and how should we respond to it? Are we using casual language that doesn't really get us to where we ought to be?
The left actually the left and liberals, but more liberals, but also the left lacks imagination. And I think the kind of imagination where you believe you are part of a national project. And there are reasons where you would not want to think that or not want to imagine that. But
the left doesn't believe they're part of a national project. Do you guys think that the left understands that they're part of a national project now with Joe Biden's all MAGA Republicans are un-American? You guys, he was like, he was asked like, where did the left go wrong? He's like, the left doesn't believe they're part of a greater national project. Do you think that has changed since this? I think that's changed since this. I think they very much believe they're part of a national project now. They very literally believe that everyone who doesn't agree with them is un-American.
With Trump, we have someone who wants to make America great again. But more interesting and weirder is a former reality TV star who actually doesn't have a lot of money, but whose money comes from branding, like his
$4
own
billion.
name recognition. It's like being in a post-structuralist novel. And I think that logic, going back to Jackson, I think we have to think about how can we offer an alternative mythology, and maybe that's impossible with
how can we offer an alternative mythology? They did that.
People that are in his demographic base. But that's why I was immediately like, we got to go back to that Popular Front day where there could be thoughts of a cross-racial solidarity that are not premised upon the terms that we're using right now. I mean, when you go back and read like Adrian Rich or Bell Hooks, when they talk about intersectionality, it's actually not about primarily about race and gender. The starting point is always class and then bringing gender and race into it. And when you read like, a lot of pieces in the last year or two about like, is class primary or is race primary? These pieces have a very abstract quality because the question is like where, who, what, like what specific context and location are we talking about? And when people say it's all about class or it's all about race, there's usually a way of actually dematerializing the subject that you're talking about and removing them from history. So what I would love is like for us to imagine some way to think about how class, race, and gender, which are all three determinative of this election, come together in a way that whose mythology that we can believe in.
I think the phrase might be, it's always about race, it's always about class, it's always about gender.
Well, I think it means one thing to say that, but what does that mean? Like when people say it's all about class, it's as though you like go into a Star Trek teleporter and you lose all of your like
every understanding you have beyond that. Bhaskar.
Whoa,
brother.
Prompting. I need prompting.
Oh no, a little prompting here, man. But then we go into the crowd for prompting. You like sweated it for Bernie Sanders this year, man. You went to New Hampshire. And froze your feet in the cold, the whole bit. And I want you to reflect for a second, because a lot of our media, which is, we could do the whole conversation on, but a lot of our media, kind of wrestles with this concept. Well, Bernie Sanders kind of talked about some of these things. And I'm interested, let's go to the core question. Do you think Bernie Sanders would have beat Donald Trump?
I think Bernie Sanders would, but I'm biased, of course. But we've been.
Well, that's why I went to you with this question.
I mean, we've making the argument from the beginning at Jacobin that Sanders was tapping into a real.
I also perused Jacobin's YouTube channel for potential videos that we could watch for Socialism Saturday. There are a couple good ones on there, but there are better socialist book publishers, to be honest. But Jacobin magazine is Jacobin magazine is as far left as left can get. So that's like that socialist. Just keep that in mind. Do they assume that if you have money, you lack the ability to empathize? No, they don't. You assume that these people believe that they have. I mean, you assume that these people have the ability to empathize. These people do not have the ability to empathize at all. They simply believe again. What is the goal of the woke left, of any of this? It's to gain as much power as possible by destabilizing the system, to attack capitalism, to usher in their Marxist utopia. They don't care if people empathize at all. All they want is to gain as much power as possible. And this presentation, this discussion took place 2 days after they had the thing that they wanted most ripped out of their hands by Donald Trump. So they're having some feelings. They're working through some feelings. They were in the early, probably acceptance, mourning process of this at this point.
Resentment and anger out there, and this anger can either polarize in either direction. It could polarize in the direction of right-wing populism and xenophobia and hate, or in the direction that Sanders was going. So I really think he would have been viable. But the Democratic Party elites, thought that they had a coalition
they all wanted Bernie
that was
Sanders.
Essentially, a professional, managerial class and
managerial
certain
class
efficiency that they could, draw out. Like,
he's talking about the managerial class because what is the code word for the managerial class? The bosses, the property owners. What are they going to start calling those? Not long after this discussion. He just said the managerial class. We wanted Bernie, but the managerial class had other ideas. Think bosses, property owners, landlords. What do they call them today? We're not moving forward in this presentation until someone says, no, it's not the 1%. That's not what it is. What do they call the managerial class? No, not elites. Managerial class. Bosses, property owners, landlords. Not masters. No. I know you guys know this. Yes! White. Yes. Gremlin for the win. Reagan with a close follow-up. Whiteness. That is correct. That is correct. That's what they call them today. Whiteness is at the top of the heap. Anytime they say whiteness, they are not referring to your skin color. They are referring to who has the power. Critical race theory is not about race. It's about power. Whiteness is just a code word for power. That's why Larry Elder can be the black face of white supremacy. Because it's not about the color of his skin. It's about that he's at the top of the heap. Or wanted to be at the top of the heap and then failed. Well, just keep that in mind. Every time they say something, like, replace that with white, and that's where you are today.
Like working class people of color, union workers across the board and whatnot. And it seemed like, and I really believe that was a coalition that could defeat Trump. I didn't think it could defeat Trumpism.
On. Amber, you're not understanding. You're not understanding. It is not the color of your skin that makes you white. It is the fact that you are a boss and a landlord that makes you white in their eyes. It has nothing to do with your skin color. You could be green and be a boss and be a landlord, and they would still call you white. Why do they do that? Because they are trying to use race to destabilize the system. The goals that the woke left have, I'll probably say them 10,000 times in this stream. Gain as much power as possible so they can destabilize the system, so they can attack capitalism, so they can usher in their Marxist utopia. Those are their goals. So why do they call it white? Because they're trying to gain as much power as possible to destabilize the system. Calling everyone that has power white uses race as a weapon to gain as much power as possible to destabilize the system. It's the destabilization of the system that they're going towards. They don't care about racism. They don't care about fairness. They don't care about justice. They don't care about any of those things. It is only about gaining as much power as possible to destabilize the system, to attack capitalism, to usher in your Marxist utopia.
In the long term, that was my concern, but I thought I could defeat Trump. But I think our argument now has to be the center left, the centrist program of the Clinton Democrats and others have failed to build a winning coalition. There's a vacuum and we have actually the answers. So instead of us saying that we have the answers to how to build politics in 2036, 2040, we have to make the argument that we have the answer to build a relevant winning politics in 2020 and 2024. And that's not compromising or not taking a step backwards on things like immigration or things like anti-racism. It's not capitulating any ground.
Maybe we should have had a bingo card. Anti-racism, ding, ding, ding.
Coalition. We might lose some of the Goldman Sachs votes. We might lose some of this managerial class vote. But we will bring in new segments of people who, first and foremost, people who aren't voting and feel alienated from both parties.
Of which there's a lot. Turnout was not that great this year.
Traditional Democratic voters that don't want to turn out either. But yes, a segment of Trump's base. I mean, I do not believe that a near polarity of the country are white supremacists or building their politics on that basis. What I do believe is that the common interest of any working class politics will have demands that will appeal to both white workers and non-white workers. I think we're going to encounter roadblocks as we build this coalition that are rooted in racism. And I
does,
think that's
Scott,
where you
doesn't
need
he?
anti-racist politics. But the actual
The
demands and
Asian
needs
writer
and
guy is the
feelings
hero
of
we didn't
vast
know we needed
majority
tonight.
of white workers, a segment of the working class that voted for Donald Trump, those are the same feelings that and desires for security and respect and dignity that all workers share, that brown and black workers, all workers share. So I think that obviously, that doesn't preclude the need for a robust anti-racist politics. But to me, that's what politics is. Politics is about uniting the many against the few. And the Democratic Party elites and other people who want to write off huge swaths of the country are constructing a losing politics, and that's what they're being, punished for.
But isn't there also, the Democratic Party's response to situations like that, it has a history. We've spoken about the Reconstruction, the pushback, civil rights, the pushback. Democratic Party has a long history of responding to a campaign that seeks to bring in diverse communities, show some respect, and in fairness to Hillary Clinton, to speak often about diversity and almost to mention the word intersectionality. But I'm just saying that the response usually is we need a Democrats for the Leisure class, or Democrats for the Democratic Leadership Council, or some kind of group that will bring it back to where the white people are.
Well, I think the Democratic Party has offered nothing to people for decades except for some real gains on the grounds of social inclusion. And we should remember that word evolved, because that's Hillary Clinton's favorite word when it comes to LGBT rights and things like this, right?
Evolved.
So it's right. It's not even that they were pushing through an agenda. They're like, we could get nothing done on the economic front, but we're gonna blaze trails for gay people and whatnot. That's not their agenda, either. They had to be pressured into that. But to the extent demands from the left and from below have been successful, it's been on these grounds of social inclusion. What they haven't been is demands that actually say we need to take something from capital and to gains. So we could have gender neutral bathrooms, but we can't tax businesses to fund shelters for trans youth. That's the basis of this Democratic Party, and that's the reason. I'm not saying that's the reason why Ohio, voted for Trump. What I'm saying is that's the reason why a lot of people didn't want to come out and didn't want to canvass for a candidate like Hillary Clinton. And now we're looking at a situation where people are angry and discontent, I think, in all the wrong places. Like, I don't want to be angry at Trump voters at this moment.
They're deplorable. Aren't they deplorables?
I'll be perfectly honest. I was in Ohio 2 weeks ago, and if I saw a Trump bumper sticker and I was alone in a parking lot, I would go, oop, up.
You're kind of scared?
Yeah. Of course, it's like seeing like a Confederate flag. It's a sign that, like, I'm not ashamed of this, this deplorable man. I'm not saying they're deplorable. No. So I understand completely all those sentiments and feelings. I don't think it's going to be kumbaya, but I do think that there is, I don't think a polarity. There's 25, 30, so whatever percentage of Trump voters that can be won over to a different platform. I think the danger is there is going to be a kind of
we're in a simulation. They're fucking with us constantly.
Push towards
that's what I think. We're in a simulation.
We're going to bring it back on certain economic issues, but we're going to concede ground on racism, on immigration, whatever. We're going to push some sort of new nationalist agenda. That we need to reject. So I want to draw a distinction with what I'm arguing, but I am saying that there is an economic populism that will, if introduced into the Democratic program platform, if mobilized by different leadership, it could win, be a winning politics.
And just to before we pivot out to folks here,
folks, FOLX.
Donald Trump didn't win the majority of the vote, the popular vote in this country. In fact, we have such a
Asian
lousy
guy's
election
a hero.
system,
I cannot wait to hear what he says in this session. I really
as regards counting votes, that it will be probably 3 to 4 weeks before we have counted all the ballots. California and Washington State still have ballots coming in because they have a 3-day rule as long as it's stamped. At the end of the day, Hillary Clinton will defeat Donald Trump in the popular vote by the widest margin of any loser for president in history. In addition, if you add on the votes for independent third-party candidates, Donald Trump's around 47%. He got exactly what Mitt Romney got, and he got less than what his Democratic opponent got. So there is an element of care that has to be brought to this thing, even in assuming that that Trump has some sort of majority politics.
Yeah.
He doesn't. A huge portion of Americans don't participate for all sorts of reasons in electoral politics. In addition to that, he didn't even win the ones who did. But we have a electoral system based on electoral college created in slavery times to make sure that democracy didn't
Electoral college is
get going
racist. If
too
you had that on
fast.
your bingo card
That
tonight,
has, for the
drink.
second time in 16 years, delivered a president who lost the election and would have lost the election for president of France. And you want to say something about that?
And that has only happened, I think, 6 times, like in United States history.
And twice
in my lifetime, which is incredible.
Yeah.
That's it.
Like, well,
That's all I
how
had to
come the
say.
Democratic Party, that is the party that lost it twice, doesn't say we should get rid of the Electoral College?
Because they don't, I mean, the same reason why it's so hard to vote in New York. There's no early voting, there's no whatever, because New York is a way, they protect and
They're talking about how hard it is for people to vote. And then they spent the next 4 years and took advantage of every opportunity for early voting, for mail-in voting, rejecting voter ID. Watch this happen in real time. They're like, holy shit, Donald Trump, we got fucked because of the voting rules. Let's start planning 2 days after Donald Trump won the election to make it easier for us to vote next time. They were talking about this immediately. Immediately. And I want people to really understand that. Because where the Republican Party completely fucked themselves is they did nothing about voting laws. They did nothing. They did nothing. The Republican Party had such hubris that they did nothing about the voting laws. Even when Trump was saying the voting laws are going to be a problem, voting laws are going to be a problem, voting laws are going to be... These people were planning from 2 days after Donald Trump won the election, not even in office yet, to finagle the voting laws to make them more advantageous for what they wanted. They planned this 4 years in advance. While Republicans were sitting around with their thumbs up their butts going, we're going to win, we're going to win, we're going to win. Republicans did nothing to stop this. And I really want everyone to hear what's the discussion that is being had on this right now and really consider that that is a discussion that was only happening on this side. But they won because they had this discussion 2 days after Donald Trump got elected. 2 days. Now, one could make the argument that Joe Biden got 81 million votes. In fact, I have to make the argument on YouTube that Joe Biden got 81 million votes. I have to make that argument. But let's just say, in a fantasy land that has no basis in reality at all, that some people might disagree with that. Let's just say that some people, not me, because I believe that Joe Biden got 81 million votes, but some people might disagree with that. What have those people done since Joe Biden got elected to make sure that the voting laws were fixed so that Joe Biden doesn't get 81 million votes again? What did the Republicans learn anything? Really consider that. Phil says, how much do you want to bet they helped plan the DC riots during the inauguration? You know, Phil, I was saying on Bitchcraft earlier, I was like, at some point, we're going to be watching these socialist presentations, and they're going to tell us exactly what they did to fortify the election. I'm going to watch a whole bunch of these things. I'm fascinated by this. At some point, we are going to find some obscure YouTube video that only has a couple hundred views in which they are going to completely confess to what they did to fortify the election. I'm convinced of it. Maybe it'll be this one, maybe it'll be another video, but I bet it's going to come at some point.
Incumbent Democratic politicians that way. They make it hard the entry for ballot access, all these things are so difficult in New York. Democrats don't care about voting rights. You know, they don't care about these things.
They care
look at
now,
it
don't they?
purely instrumentally. That's why, like, you know, Trump said that like very awkwardly uncomfortable to explicitly racist speech where he's like, Black people, Democrats don't care about you, but half of it is like Democratic politicians have traditionally looked at
Democrats care about voting rights now, don't they?
Americans and all these different constituencies as different parts of a patronage network. And the only, you know, the worst thing about this is since the late 60s, since the 70s, they haven't been actually doling out any patronage. They've been just like, you know.
I mean, that was Gabriel Kalkov's critique, right? That the machine actually was pretty good at bringing people into the process, and the old school political machine actually gave you something back. They at least picked up your garbage and maybe helped your kid find a job. Now, the machine doesn't even give anything back. Before we go to the crowd, I haven't heard from you in a while.
You just want me to say something?
Something good, something powerful here.
Something powerful, no pressure.
Are we talking too much about electoral politics?
Yeah, I'm bored, so I haven't said anything. No, this is all very important. I mean, you know, the point about the Electoral College, I think no one really wants to see, no one in power wants to see the Electoral College go away for obvious reasons. It's a check. It's supposed to be a check on populism. I mean, in some ways, this wasn't populism, right?
Well, thank you, Karen. Welcome to the channel. I hope you stick around.
This was a strong minority that ended up taking everyone else hostage. So the Electoral College, in some ways, fulfilled its role. In some ways, you know, I mean, this election isn't about change. This election is about a certain segment of the population that doesn't want to see a certain kind of America go away. You know, this is about white, conservative, socially conservative, Christian Americans trying to preserve their America, you know?
Yeah,
and the Electoral College, right? And the Electoral College is not an agent of change, you know? I mean, obviously we can argue that, okay, well, it's change in other ways, fine. But, you know, but I think fundamentally that the drivers were not, I mean, economics played an important role, but I do think that these social and cultural issues were, at the end of the day, I think from my perspective, the deciding factors in all of this.
Did you notice that last night? Like, I was up at 3 a.m. Was everybody up at 3?
Yeah, how many people stayed up?
Okay, just checking. All right. And you're conscious now, which is very impressive. But last night, the thing that struck me was, like, we were doing an Amy Goodman show, and at a certain point, they said, oh yeah, the 1990s stock market, you know, engines clicked in because the futures indexes were collapsing to such an extent that you have to like cut off things or companies die, right? Like, it's capitalism, everything you've been working on, you know, it all happens in one night. But then today it kind of like clicked back. Yeah. They're sort of like, oh yeah, it's the apocalypse. And then, oh, you know, maybe it's not so bad. Paul Ryan's got a gig. No, I'm not kidding. But isn't that, you know, it's sort of like, it goes to the heart of what you were saying there, that I think capital power got really freaked out for about an hour or so, about 3 a.m. Mm-hmm. And then it was sort of like, oh, maybe we can work with this.
I think a lot of this is about process, right? So, I mean, Obama's speech today, I think, was terrible.
Gracious, wasn't it?
It was terrible. It normalized all of this, and its focus was on process. It completely ignored the substance of what had happened, the things that have been said. And it said, as Americans, we need to stand behind our president because that's the process. That is the democratic process. But what is the value of democracy when the substance of that democracy revolves around ideas and principles that exclude an enormous number of Americans? Yeah. Right?
In fact, the majority.
And that's what the Electoral College is too. It's a process. It's all a process. And I think until we stop privileging the process above all else, this will continue. This will continue ad infinitum. And
in fact, twice in your lifetime, right?
That's correct.
So
yeah.
This is real experience. We're not looking. I always love, like, the pundit class comes up with these things that, oh, this could happen, right? You could have a 289 split in the electorate, or 279, all this stuff like that, or 269. But it does happen. It actually happens, and it stops progress.
It does. And I think it's really important to talk about, like, who's excluded in the process, so to speak, the democratic process. I mean, like incarcerated people
Can't vote.
Can't vote, and even if they can, there's enormous misinformation about this. Like, you know, if you are convicted of a misdemeanor in New York State, you actually can vote like while you're in prison.
But you think maybe,
and yet
maybe you
most
gotta be
people
careful
don't.
about that. Yeah, because you never know what's going to happen if you ask. Right?
It's deliberate. It's deliberately obscured, and that's a large part of how the voting mechanism works. The other thing is the Voting Rights Act was gutted.
First election since the 1960s where we did not have the full protections of the Voting Rights Act, and intriguingly enough, a candidate endorsed by the Ku Klux Klan gets elected president.
Yeah, I mean, I believe I'm a fact checker, so don't quote me on these numbers, but I believe some 300,000 people in Wisconsin, which was a deciding state, were excluded via the strict new voter ID requirements, and the state was won by around 75,000 votes. So that's, you know, to give you an idea.
We might take that seriously.
Let's hope so.
Yeah. All right, that guy has a question. Oh, hold it. Ho, 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 ho. Sorry, guy with question. We have the arrival of the last of our comrades.
Comrades!
You have been
Comrades!
introduced, and you've missed our.
Phil says, Doc, blame bot for this. I would like to run for sheriff in New Hampshire. What would I have to do? We got to get some signatures, and you gotta be registered with the state, and that's about it. It's actually really easy to run for sheriff in New Hampshire. If you want to talk to Ben Weir, who is currently running for sheriff in New Hampshire, he'll be able to help you out. He had to get about 150 signatures. He had to make sure he was registered, and that's it. Comrades, mount the like button, comrades.
Our lively discussion so far about this election and some of the class race economic issues that have been in play. And you're probably perfectly suited from not listening to our discussion to enter in and tell us what you think about this whole thing.
Oh, gosh.
I'm sorry, I apologize. You just ran up on the subway, but you have written a lot about politics, and you've written a lot about politics, not just electoral, but the politics that plays out in people's struggles.
Hi, everybody. I feel a little bit self-conscious not hearing what's been said, but one thing I will say that occurred to me about 6 months ago, that at the time
I should say Donna Birch, I mean, just so people know.
Oh, okay.
It's my error. Donna Birch, who's a brilliant professor and thinker and all sorts of good stuff.
Oh, well, thank you for that. Something that occurred to me 6 months ago that I thought about it, and then there are so many different things going on simultaneously. But I remember feeling anxiety about, you know, this longstanding truth about polling, that there was always a disjuncture between the predicted polling for African American candidates and exit polling, because people were hesitant to tell pollers.
It's referred to as the Bradley effect.
The Bradley effect, yeah, thank you. I don't know if you guys have talked about that already, but they were hesitant to tell pollsters that they weren't going to vote for a Black candidate. And I remember thinking that this was very likely true of the first female presidential candidate. And it's something that occurred to me. I didn't write about it, but I did think about it. And so there was a skepticism that was always in the back of my mind about the polling data, but I purposely didn't focus on it. And one of the reasons is because I was really concerned about a left critique of Hillary Clinton and trying to move her to the left, because I thought that was the best way to make her a viable candidate. And I felt that the spectacle of Trump, so much of it, you know, the media creation of a spectacle of Trump, I really wasn't willing to engage in it. So I would very selectively check in and pay attention to what Trump was doing, but I was careful not to get immersed in the kind of, you know, the immense drama of Trump. So but I do remember feeling that 6 months ago, and there's a part of me that wished that I had written about it and talked about it more, because I did feel that gender had a deep and profound influence on real voting behavior. But at the same time, I was part of a left woman of color feminist critique of Hillary Clinton that was very concerned about talking about, you know, especially as a historian, about the legacy of the Clintons, the importance of mass incarceration incarceration, the evisceration of the welfare state, and understanding that as a feminist issue. So critiquing the liberal feminism that Hillary represented, but at the same time, kind of deep within my psyche, I thought that this might be a real data problem.
And in fact, isn't there another data problem, which is that after Donald Trump has done 5,000 unimaginably horrific things, all of which have been reported on that day, when the call comes at night and somebody says to you, you can vote for Donald Trump, there might actually have been some folks who said, I don't know, when in fact they were going to do it. I think polling was a crisis this year because we had all these factors of gender, I think race playing out, all sorts of xenophobic issues, but also the personality of this guy who's on a bus talking about things that I still can't say in this crowd because I'm a Midwesterner. And I wonder if that made all polling a disaster. It clearly did because it was all wrong.
I think so. Well, there are just so many complex factors that were at play in ways that, I mean, one of the things I found interesting about this lead up was just the visibility of women as electoral constituency, and that I really saw that begin in 2008, a real self-conscious analysis about this new coalition being created about female voters, voters under 30, LGBTQ, African-American voters, a new kind of coalition.
No one just yet, Tom J. No one just yet. Welcome. Thank you for the super chat.
To the Panther coalitions of the early 70s, so it was new. But I did see suddenly more and more female commentators in the same way you had the Obama effect with a number of black pundits, seeing, women political scientists that I knew being asked to talk on national television about the female vote. And I thought that was interesting. But I think we have yet to fully understand how to integrate gender with race and class because it intersected in complex ways. You can see it. I was just studying on my phone the breakdown among different groups by gender. So if I remember correctly, for African-American, 94% of African-American women supported Clinton, but 80% of African-American men. So there's a 14% disjuncture. And then among Latinos, it was, I think, 63% of Latino men voted for Hillary Clinton, but it was, I basically need bifocals. 69% of Latino women. So you had a spread of 5%. So I don't want to break it only along categories of identity, but it's necessary to do that in order to understand how gender operated in this election. For me, one of the biggest paradoxes is that I've come from Erie County. So I was up at 2 o'clock when they were looking at Erie County. I grew up there, I know it very well. That area is 95% white and has a tiny 5% black population. But the amazing thing is that in 2008, Erie, Pennsylvania went for Obama.
Oh yeah.
And in this election, it became absolutely key to Trump taking Pennsylvania. So I think there are complex things at work. The irony that I find is that, the kind of, it's not just white working class. I mean, what I remember about Trump supporters is, weren't they making on average between $50,000 and $80,000 a year? It's
71.
71. Okay, thank you. I knew it was around that, but that they're supporting a candidate who became famous on a television reality show for saying you're fired. This anxiety around precarity and how that intersected with his own persona really for firing people. And so there's this absurdist element at the same time combined with these very serious questions about downward mobility, managing imperial decline, and the complex nature of our electorate, in which I do think intersectionality was appropriated by the Hillary Clinton campaign for very specific reasons, but I still think we need analysis that can look at how these different vectors intersect with one another. I think it's impossible to understand the outcome of this election without it.
Just so, Katie, on one last element before we take some questions for us. One of the phenomena, or one of the things that I thought was fascinating in this campaign was that you had most of our media saying, well, this is the white working class responding, and when in fact, if you look at the polling data, this is the white middle class. And in a sense, this campaign seems to have ended up, especially in that final vote, with many white middle class women coming across and voting for Trump, a situation that is really an extension of the Tea Party, which was the first mass movement organized, populist movement organized against the poor. And rather than trying to bring the poor into something, this is actually a movement that said, no, you're one rung up, and let's all vote together to make sure that we don't become part of that, the next rung down. You want to say something, or you got?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. I mean, the civil rights historian Clay Carson wrote a very short blog right before the Democratic National Convention, and basically what he said is white people are supporting Trump. So I think that, you know, it was interesting in corporate media, they kept saying,
Isn't it funny? Isn't it funny that 2 days after Trump won the 2016 election, they're talking about how white people supported Trump, white people supported Trump, white people supported Trump. And then they spent the next 4 years convincing anyone that they were white, anyone that disagreed with them that they were white. Really think about that. This is really insidious. They convinced themselves that the reason that their arch nemesis Donald Trump won was because of white people. And then they spent the next several years doing everything in their power to convince every single person who politically disagreed with them, even just a little bit, that they were really white, even if they were black, even if they were Latino. That's what happened. Yeah, well, I mean, they actually do believe that Candace Owens is white. They believe that Herschel Walker's white. They believe that Tim Scott is white. This is why they're all about, like, you know, like this is why they talk about whiteness all the time. And again, remember, whiteness is not about the color of your skin. Has nothing to do with the color of your skin in the way that they're using it. The way they're using it is who owns the power. In their minds, white people took the power away from them. And so they convinced those white people that they were, well, not even white people, they convinced the people that took the power away from them that they were bad. And that made people less inclined to join that team. Yeah, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black. Exactly. Exactly.
Donald Trump has a problem with white college-educated women, by which they meant Trump is winning all of the white population except for a small percentage of educated women, only 6%. So I think whether it's white working class.
Let's see, Tom J, thank you for the super chat. Uncle Tom from Larry Elder was great, but Uncle Tom 2 was better. My one complaint is that the Titus Cop guy that goes on Timcast sometimes, but overall Uncle Tom 2, which I am, was great. I haven't seen either of them, so I'll take your word for it, but I know a lot of people do really like those movies, and people should check them out if there's something that they're interested in. Phil asks, so is black associated with poor in their minds and their language? Yes. Yes, it is. But it's not even just poor. It's not just poor. It's they don't associate black people with power. That's what it's really about. It's because remember, these people don't really care about racial justice. They don't care about racism. They only care about power. But yeah, I mean, they really do think that all black people are poor. They think that all black people live in inner cities. I think you mean Tatum. I don't like Brandon Tatum either. Brandon Tatum lied about me to 1.5 million of his subscribers because he didn't bother to do a simple fact check. So no, Brandon Tatum is not one of my favorite. Well, like, let's be honest. I think I don't have much use for like 90% of conservative influencers, so it should be no surprise that Brandon Tatum is like on my shit list. But no, I have no use for that guy. That guy's a moron. He is a legit moron.
Class, you know, of course, the numbers of working class people are larger. Yeah. That's why. I mean, their numbers are simply larger. But you know, no Democrat has won the majority of the white vote since really the incorporation of black people into the Democratic Party. So there's a piece of this that's simply the history of the Republican Party, people voting their party interest. It's not particular to.
Oh, am I? And yet you're the one who's sitting here watching me. Guys, what is like the #1 rule of my chat? What's the #1 rule of my chat? I hope you're talking about the woman in the video and not me winning reality. Because you could just be talking about the woman in the video. If you're talking about the woman in the video, I'll let it slide. Don't whine. Don't whine is a rule of my chat. Don't be a dick. Don't be a douche. Don't be a dick. Tom J, and as James Lindsay says, it all goes back to communism. Yes. Tatum. Yup. We got you, Tom J. Thank you for the super chat. Yes, guys, just as a reminder, for those of you who might be new here, the #1 rule of my chat is don't be a dick. If you are a dick in my chat, you will find yourself quickly banned. And insulting me is a really quick way to get banned. I'll tell you that right now. Not putting up with that shit. Put up with it for 2 years, not putting up with it anymore. Well, I like you, bot. So if I like you and I have a rapport with you, you have leniency.
Trump, but despite the visibility of Republicans against Trump, this pattern continued.
But they turned out to be a tiny elite, right? That wasn't the Republican Party united pretty well behind Trump when all was said and done.
Absolutely.
Comrade?
I said that Ronald Reagan's kicked off his presidential campaign in Philadelphia, Mississippi, which is known for absolutely nothing else except for the execution of 3 civil rights workers, and he was endorsed by the KKK too. So I'm not saying that the Republican Party is very much a party that's always had this broad coalition that went everywhere from center right business interests to like this far right, David Duke fringe.
Comrade, drink.
Is unique. There's many unique things about him. The form of mobilization that Trump is taking,
well,
it's kind of popular.
Good for you, Tom J.
It does signify something.
You're making someone happy.
Shouldn't lose, track of what the Republican Party, historically has been. It's not like David Duke was out there, campaigning for some, third party or something like that. He was, presumably, he ran as a Democrat and a Republican.
Yeah, but he made his breakthrough as a Republican. I covered him in Louisiana. That was
David Duke.
I know.
David Duke, years as a Democrat.
He's always looking for a convenient place to, he's a fluid politician. You got something you want to throw in here, brother?
I think that Trump is not exceptional in the sense that he is an expression of the American project, and like the thing about going back to Jacksonian, regimes is part of that. But I think that it is a little bit important to, one, see Trump as very contingent, like the margins very narrow when you added up all the differences. Okay. And two, also Trump as exceptional in certain ways, like these sort of cultural politics, the specific type of coalition he formed, and I think also his politics in that, a lot of the things are things like being against NAFTA, being against TPP, things that you might not expect if you were just expecting the Republicans to be the party of capital. But I want to respond. I thought you had so many great points. And I thought like this thing of like, do we choose between diversity versus class? I feel like that's like a cliche of the left, and we have to be more imaginative than that. Because one could similarly say, the managerial liberal class, you can get flex time, you can have discounts from your transit card, you can work at home sometimes. There are all sorts of class favorable, convenient things that are not distributionist that you can get if you're a lawyer, like a 401k where the company does matching. No one would look at those things and say, well, in that case, class is just a cosmetic, fixer-upper. I dismiss class. There are all kinds of very cosmetic bargains that are made to the managerial class. And I think the important thing is to think about, for every issue, there's a set of like very cheap, uninteresting giveaway, assets, but then there are deeper commitments. But the thing I want to say about a lot of the things I thought you said that were so great at being incisive at summarizing these things is the way that Trump's coalition makes us think about class in very interesting ways, and that everyone here probably knows that they weren't working class, even though that was the line. But it makes you wonder, what is class? Because they were rebelling against the managerial elite, and they were also revolting against cultural class, like the education divide, So there are many forms of class, from like owning production versus having money, towards like going to an elite school or working in information technology, service environment, living in a coastal city. So that's one thing. Like there's a way where they have certain types of class, but not other types. The other thing is, I think the precarity is so interesting, because we always think about the precarious subject as like the grad student or domestic worker or undocumented immigrant. But these people think they're precarious, and they're middle-class white people who make more than I do. you know? And so what does that mean?
But they are in fact precarious.
They are in fact
Yeah,
precarious.
that's our
And
economy.
we all know the answer of why this happened, which is like neoliberal policies gutting the middle class, right?
40 years.
Get a less precarious job.
Yeah,
He is the most
workers
in
have
tune person in this entire panel. He's like, this is because they gutted the middle class.
Race to the bottom, globalization, 20 years of a digital revolution that changes
We
every
like
way
10.
we interrelate to one another, and 8 to 10 years of an automation revolution is going to change everything about our work. They feel, a lot of people feel in a very precarious position.
And can I add to that? Something I read actually on the way here, reading everything I could about the election analysis because I was working all day. The Iowa paradox. I don't know if people have talked about that, but Iowa that has one of the lowest rates of unemployment that went for Trump. And so people went and did social research. And essentially what people said is that, yeah, we have jobs, but we're terrified about our retirement and we're terrified about our children. So very much in the same way, the profundity of how the Bernie Sanders campaign spoke to, we want a future. That anxiety, not just precarity as in quotidian everyday concerns about money and rent, but, the projection into the future. I've always felt, coming from the heart of Reagan Democrat land, the tragedy of watching, and Erie is truly, post-industrial, lost its dirty, heavy industry, dirtier than steel, castings, foundries, and commodity chemicals, watching working class white people that I lived around sell out their children's future because they were terrified that the tiny number of Black families that lived on the east and west side were going to get something that they felt they didn't deserve. And I think that is that's like the bitter fruit. That is the direct line that connects to me the Reagan era to Trump and makes it unexceptional. The thing I do think is new about Trump is talking about building a separation wall with Mexico, the intensity of the anti-Muslim rhetoric. And there are, of course, precedents for this, but I think that it's been interesting to watch the scale of anti-Mexican and anti-Muslim racism in a way with a paternalism towards African Americans, which is mobilized also for Trump's own sense of heroism. But I think it's worth marking that because part of the law and order discourse, I didn't see the law and order discourse, at least initially, as really mobilizing people. What I saw really mobilize Trump, and I was in Southern California and people predicted it, was calling Mexicans rapists. And I thought it's speaking to some of the anxiety about the shifting demographics in the US, as well as anti-Black racism and anti-Muslim.
Questions?
Hi. I just want to direct this question to Bhaskar, who I'm aware has to leave in about 10 minutes.
Okay. I want to just do a quick pause. Look at this audience. Okay. Now, one of the things that we noticed from the Socialism Conference last week was that none of those people wore color. None of them wear color. It's the weirdest thing in the world. It's like they legitimately think they live in 1984. Do you see any color in that audience at all? Do you see, like, okay, we got someone with a green hat over here, but I'm not saying that all these people are socialists because I don't necessarily think that they are all so, and they're all white too. Yes, Andrew, you're right. They're all white. I don't necessarily think they're all socialists, but they're definitely like this one, this woman right here, socialist for sure. I don't think this one is. I think she's a useful idiot. This guy, yes. This guy over here, definitely. That I don't know how to explain this. I don't know how to explain this other than like socialists have a very specific, like, and again, we're talking about the real socialists. We're not talking about CNN socialists. We're talking about the real ones. They have a very specific look about them. And it's something you pick up on when you start watching socialist content. They look very monochromatic. They all look the women don't wear, like, I don't know what, I don't necessarily believe this woman's like a true believer because you want to know why? She's wearing makeup. Socialist women don't wear makeup. Which, like, whatever, I'm not one to judge. I'm just saying, like, this is how you can start to identify who these people actually are. Black hat and scarf Antifa. I agree. So let's see.
Down because he's got to go to Britain to explain the election.
Indeed.
To Europe.
And so first of all, I just want to let everyone hear.
Europe anymore.
I know. Yeah, it's true.
It's already great.
It's already Brexit.
I want to let everyone here know that you can line up if you want to ask a question because we're live streaming this, so I want to get the questions in the microphone. And I guess the other, the reason for organizing this panel, or the feeling that everyone in this room has, is a
Socialist.
sense of pain
That
and
dude,
sense of
definitely
urgency.
socialist.
Not
100%.
just
Probably
about,
Antifa.
Understanding what we did wrong.
Look how pissed he is.
But actually, in concrete terms, being able to think about what do we do now.
Definitely at least socialist.
So I would love to hear, Bhaskar, first of all, for you to just briefly reflect on, what Jacobin's role was in, or failure of Jacobin to oppose Trump. Do you have regrets about that, as many of us on the radical left sort of are grappling with this question? And then the other is, what do you propose we do now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's...
Well, Bhaskar, we got a big crowd and some live stream, so explain the...
No, I mean, I would say, well, Jacobin is a nonprofit, doesn't endorse any candidate in any circumstance. These distinctions will be more and more important as...
He doesn't look like a skinhead to me. Just because you have a shaved head doesn't mean you're a skinhead. He doesn't look like a skinhead to me at all. So I disagree with you on that.
Trump rises to as he populates the IRS. But I mean, I think the question is, did we see the primary threat as the far right? Did we see it kind of as a plague on both houses kind of thing, where we must both attack Trump but explain why Clinton is an inadequate solution? And I think this applies broadly to those, like I'm vice chair of, one of the vice chairs of Democratic Socialists of America, and others who
I am
took the line
shocked.
that, socialists
I am
shouldn't
shocked that he's the
necessarily
vice chair of
be,
the
or this
Democratic
is,
Socialists of America.
a
Shocked
cohort
say.
within DSA, be campaigning for Hillary Clinton.
Mount that like button if you are
and
shocked by
canvassing
this
and doing those
revelation
sorts
that
of
he's a
things, and
DSA
even in
vice
swing
chair.
states. As an individual, I would have voted for Hillary Clinton in a swing state. I would have not, spent a lot of effort to get out the vote efforts and things like that. Why? Because there's only a couple thousand socialists in the United States, a few thousand of us. And I thought we had different work to do in social movements and in other spheres that would not be, that useful, just like lumping that into a big, well-funded Democratic Party, get out the vote effort. I still think that was, correct and justified, though. Obviously, I woke up this morning, I'm like, would have felt a little bit better about myself if I at least had, voted for Hillary Clinton. But then a couple hours later, I was like, never mind, so I think fundamentally, who's to blame for this election? I think a segment of the pundit class is going to blame Trump voters. I think that's stupid politically, and I think it's wrong. I think the people to blame, I don't think necessarily another segment is going to blame Hillary Clinton as a campaigner.
Well,
she just wasn't a great campaigner.
Michael's bringing up a great point. So guys, if you just joined, what are the things? This is a presentation from 2 days after Donald Trump won the election in 2016. And we're basically reverse engineering to see how the socialists analyzed this and what changes they made between then and 2020 and how far their message actually got from a small library to the national stage. So we've been identifying things that they're bringing up that then came to fruition. So Michael has just identified that they didn't have a get out the vote effort. Guess what? They did this time. Not only did they fortify that election, not only did they go after voting laws in every way that they could, but they absolutely had a get out the vote effort this time. They absolutely did. So they learned. The difference between the left and the right is the left learned from their loss. The right did not.
Campaigner wasn't a great speaker, and that would have made the difference. I also think that's wrong. I think Hillary Clinton was just merely, a figure that represented a whole generation of Democratic Party leaders and elites. And the real problem was the set of politics and the coalition that they built. And it really has given almost nothing to people for decades. And the things that it has, given to people have been just minor things on the margins and whatnot. So the best way I would describe it is I think on the left, our stance is that, yes, we want to make America great. We just erase the again part. Whereas a huge chunk of the people who were running Hillary Clinton campaign, Hillary Clinton herself, Barack Obama said this multiple times too, America never stopped being great. That was their line, because America never stopped being great, for them. In 2008, between 2008 and 2016, my life certainly got better. I entered college. I got a college degree. I'm the youngest of 5. Only one other of my siblings has a college degree. So I'm definitely, the last 8 years have been good for me. I think a lot of Clinton voters, a lot of most enthusiastic backers, certainly all of our backers in the media feel the same way. The general sentiment in the country is not that. That's the disconnect. Most people in this country don't have a college degree. Most people in this country live within 12, 13 miles of their parents. There's a million little and obviously I don't ascribe class to those, cultural categories, but there's a million different ways in which people feel a disconnect. There's a huge disconnect between the, professional classes that formed a big chunk of Clinton's coalition and a lot of Americans who voted for Trump. And I will run to my thing, but I think Alex Coburn might have said this, but it might have been someone else. Who was describing the Tea Party base. He's like, there's a chunk of people in America who have all the money in the world and can hire, if they have a legal problem, they can hire any lawyer. And they can afford the best lawyers, they get the best lawyers. That's elite, that's a typical ruling class. There's a chunk of Americans who know they really want a good, expensive lawyer, but are way too poor to ever afford one. So they get, really bad lawyers and they're screwed over. And then there's a middle layer of Americans who probably could afford a lawyer if they really stretched, but think that they would be better off representing themselves because lawyers are a bunch of crooks or whatever. I think that kind of that's a petty bourgeoisie. And that's a coalition that, a lion's share of Trump's support was built around. So when I'm talking about breaking off segments of the Trump, voting bloc, I'm really talking about a percentage from, I don't know what it is, 25, 30%, which I do think is disproportionate, but not entirely white workers who are alienated from the Democratic Party for perfectly reasonable reasons. And again, building this kind of big a multiracial coalition will necessitate and involve anti-racist, politics. But I don't think you start from the standpoint of we're writing off this huge chunk of the country and we're going to try to, construct a coalition that could win, a slim.
I was obviously I was very much a Democrat in 2016. I was very much I was a Democrat all my life, right? Up until really mid 2019 when I started questioning a lot of things. And then I ultimately red pilled and left the Democratic Party in early 2020. But the reason I bring this up is that, again, this is late 2016 and we've already heard several mentions of anti-racism. I never heard talk about anti-racism up until 2019, essentially. Up until 2019. All the talk about anti-racism and anti-racist training and anti-racist this and anti-racist that and white fragility and all these things, I never heard about it. And I was very Democrat and all of my friends were Democrat. And so the point I'm making is, again, these are the people that are driving the conversation. The anti-racism stuff comes from socialists. It comes from these people. Okay? In one of the socialist YouTube channels that I was looking for content for Socialism Saturday, they literally have a conversation with Ibram X. Kendi on that channel about anti-racist baby. We're probably going to watch it at some point. The anti-racism stuff that has now taken over everything came from these people. When I say the socialists are winning, it is because they are driving the narrative. They are driving the talking points. What have I been saying in the last week? What these people said 5 years ago in a presentation that no one had ever heard of before will become the talking points of the Democratic Party. We're literally seeing that play out with the anti-racism stuff. This is a presentation from almost 6 years ago. I had never heard of anti-racism at this point. It is now one of the core talking points of the Democratic Party. So people can dismiss socialists all they like. They can say, "Oh, they're crazy. That stuff is never going to happen." But I bet Republicans were dismissing them then too. But guess what? Now their talking points have taken over the mainstream left. This is why we're watching this content. This is why we have to take them seriously, because what socialists say today will become Democrat and CNN talking points tomorrow. Tom J., thank you for the super chat. Brett and Heather are finally leaving Portland for an island in Washington. Well, they're still staying in Washington State, which is a mistake. Correct, though, the left never quits, no matter how stupid or hypocritical they are. Again, though, Uncle Tom 2 was mostly about socialism and communism. I appreciate that, Tom J. Thank you.
Margin everywhere. I think that's, morally and ethically, unacceptable if we're on the left.
We still got a couple more minutes of you. You want to throw something in?
Yeah, I don't know how quick this is going to be. I'm going to try to make it quick. So, it's more of a unformed thought than anything else. We hear kind of like very similar narratives about why people voted the way they did. They voted because they didn't feel like government was accountable. They voted because they felt really disconnected from government. But I'm thinking about my American history, and I'm thinking, when in American history was the government not this elite institution that was fairly disconnected from the population?
I think there was a brief period when the many voting rights movements and right up to 18 to 21-year-old voting in the early 70s, where you really did have a lot of people getting in the room.
Right.
And it was right about the moment that they wrote the Powell memo and said, hey, we got to change our electoral politics.
But brief, right?
It was very brief.
So
matter of a small number of years. And you wrote about it, you've written about it with the Panthers. It was this moment where street movements that were in the street actually thought, wow, we could do some pretty major political things.
And those were a very new phenomenon,
yeah.
Right, in a lot of ways. But I'm thinking, now when we hear this sort of like this desire for accountability, on the left, of course, accountability is this very natural thing to want as a voter. But the American public is not generally leftist. And for hundreds of years has been quite content with having an elite group rule it, right? So what has changed? What has changed, I feel like a broken record, is that the tent has gotten bigger, right? So it's not just white men, it's men and women of a variety of different colors and creeds and ethnicities. And so again, I think it's critical for us to understand the nature of the problem, right? Understand the nature of the problem if we're going to actually start to do something about it. And I think we need to maybe look beyond some of these very now what have become almost mythological narratives about what the problem is. Is that really the problem? There definitely is a backlash against the elite. I'm not going to say that that doesn't exist, but where does it come from? What is the true root of this issue? And again, like I said, it's an unformed thought. I don't have an answer to that question, but just wanting to push back a little bit on that.
I gotcha. Bhaskar, you have 2 minutes before you got to go get your plane.
The last, it's going to be tight. It's like it leaves at 11. It's international. Trump just security lines might be tougher this time around.
People need your insight.
Well, I would say this. I do honestly believe, that there is a already existing social democratic polarity of this country that just needs to be organized and activated. That's the premise of my politics. If that premise is wrong, then my politics is wrong, and most of my efforts are in vain.
Get out of here. Bhaskar, get it from Jacobin. All right. Comrade, you're on. You've been
Comrade, drink.
Question percolate for a while.
Sure, yeah. Well, I guess this result took me, and I think most people, by surprise. So I'm still kind of wrestling with what the future looks like, essentially. Like I kind of knew what critique I'd have from the left of a Clinton administration. I kind of knew what I thought, how that would look, but I just, I didn't expect this, and I don't think a lot of people did. So I guess I just wanted to, this conversation still feels like it's retrospective and like assessing the Trump phenomenon. I kind of wanted to maybe ask about the future. The title of the panel itself is Trump's America and Anti-Fascist Organizing, which to me raises all these huge questions. I mean, what do those terms mean for the people with anti-fascist organizing? There was a lot of stuff about what it would mean to have Trump elected, that he's a fascist, he's gonna, I mean, is that the terms people are proposing for what we are expecting? And what does organizing mean? And I'm sad Bhaskar's gone because it was kind of a question for him, because it sounded like to me, he's talking about electoral organizing for 2020. And to me, I'm thinking,
exactly.
About,
2 days after the election, they're talking about electoral organizing.
I don't think Trump, you could say we're living under fascism now. But I mean, if that's a useful lens to look through, anti-fascist organism to me means more like confronting fascists on the street.
I told you he was Antifa. I fucking told you he was Antifa.
Of some larger, bigger, possible electoral
Everyone owes
later,
me a
really
$2 super chat. Okay,
politics.
not really, but you know.
Question. All right.
I told you he was Antifa.
Who wants to grab? So that you've laid a lot on the table. That's very useful. And so, somebody want a part of that?
We should be confronting fascists in the street.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, so I do most of my work not on the United States, on the Middle East and North Africa. So I have a little bit of, I don't know, insight or thoughts about what you do when you're faced with an authoritarian regime, which, based on what he said, this could be. I think that there is. I think one of the things that I think he's right when he said he built a movement.
Tom J, you don't owe me a $2 super chat.
That. He built a movement, and I think what's
Thank you,
actually
Reagan. I
extraordinary
appreciate
about
it's like
that
a fake
movement
$2
is that
super
it did
chat.
defy all odds, right? There wasn't necessarily a lot of money behind it. There wasn't necessarily a lot of infrastructure behind it. But what there was behind it was the ability to tap into something, right? So he was able to do that, and that alone was enough. I think in some ways we should take inspiration from what he did.
You can mount the like button in
I don't
lieu
have
of
a lot
giving
of
me a
specifics
$2
around
super
what
chat
that
for
is,
being
but
right about
the
that
sort
guy
of
being Antifa.
organizing that happened in the region, like around the Arab Spring, was again
Oh,
really movement
thank you,
focused.
Phil.
It
Phil
wasn't about
abides
electoral
by
politics.
the honor
I mean,
system.
we have a
Thank
different
you, Phil.
infrastructure here, and so electoral politics can be a part of the organizing without a doubt. It couldn't in the region.
Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate
but I think we
it.
need to not discount the importance of activist politics, specifically around creating social narratives. So over the last couple of years, we've seen in the United States, over the last 5-6 years, we've seen actually the way movements can shift social policies, right? So the Black Lives Matter movement has now started seeping into the judicial system. You have judges issuing decisions they would have never issued before, citing things like the ACLU report on the profiling of Black men in Boston to let a Black man to essentially expunge evidence against a Black man and expunge his conviction because of that report, which would have never happened, would not have happened 10 years, didn't happen 10 years ago.
And we just had roughly a half dozen district attorneys elected yesterday who were informed by the Black Lives Matter movement, at least to some extent, in places like Florida and Texas. It's kind of remarkable at the local level where you see that intersection.
And not to be the person that constantly like discounts the role of the economic factors and issues in all of this, but in America in particular, I mean, social and cultural issues are so incredibly important.
Thank you, George. I appreciate it.
And if you can take hold of that social and cultural conversation, you have an immense amount of power. You can shape electoral politics. You can do all sorts of things. So I think that, and shaping that conversation is not easy, right? Because most of America does not necessarily share the politics of this room. But figuring out how you begin to actually make a dent in that conversation. And I think using activist politics is the way you do that. This has to be grassroots. It has to start from the grassroots. In the region, that's how it starts.
I just want to point out, she is basically right now laying the groundwork for the Time Magazine fortification article. That's what I'm hearing. Is anyone else hearing that? She's basically like, she is laying the groundwork for all of the things that they did in that Time Magazine fortification article.
And it had all sorts of issues, but that's how it started. And I think that's how it needs to start here as well. And there are movements that it can build off of. And now we have this figure to unite around, right? We have this one figure in Iran in 1978, 1979. You had disparate groups that all united around this one hated figure, you know? And again, the ending is we could critique that, but the power of a Trump is actually something we can use to our benefit.
Grab it, and then I know.
The power of Trump is something that we can use to our benefit. Isn't that ominous? Isn't that ominous? Again, guys, if you're just joining us, this was a talk that was given 2 days after Donald Trump won the 2016 election. We are listening to it to then figure out how many things they said in this conversation became reality today. But this was almost 6 years ago. They do love Trump, Andrew. They do love Trump. They needed Trump. The left needed Trump in order to create a national movement. She stated the quiet thing out loud. Yes, she did, Deborah. Yes, she did. No, bot, please do not mail me 1,000 pennies. I appreciate the gesture, but no, I will decline. Thank you.
No, Donna's got something she wants to throw in as well. Go for it.
So I was just going to say that we know that after Brexit, hate crimes increased by something like 400%. Just in Trump's reign, Jewish people, Muslim people have seen
Trump's
an
reign. Trump wasn't even in
amount
office
of
yet.
hate.
Trump wasn't even in office
almost
yet.
set on fire in Manhattan on Fifth Avenue. So I think that for me,
setting things
Antifa
on fire, you
organizing,
don't say.
Maybe doesn't look like catching a charge and like beating the shit out of a Nazi, but at the very least intervening when you see someone Muslim or Jewish getting harassed, you know what I mean? And putting yourself, I guess, in between as someone with a little bit more privilege.
We're coming off our friend's question here that this is also obviously on a personal level intervening, but also perhaps organizing,
yes, exactly,
so that we have some structure to intervene, you know, to take it up that one next level.
Absolutely, yeah.
Just building on what other people have said, I do think, you know, anti-fascist organizing, thinking about Popular Front organizing and bringing together these multiple different kinds of protests. The DAPL protests that took place in Grand Central Station, I think was really important, you know, wedding that with, I just came back.
One of the things they talked about in that Time Magazine fortification article, and I'm going to be honest, it's been a minute since I read that article because I read it right after it came out and I haven't read it since. But one of the things they talked about was bringing all of these groups together, all of these different protesting groups together, not necessarily like, you know, forming official alliances, but working with each other, communicating with each other, making sure they were using organized protests to make sure that people were in the place they needed them to be when they needed them to be. So again, what this woman is saying right now made its way into that Time Magazine fortification article.
Back from Chicago out of an amazing organizing meeting that was bringing together activists from Palestine, South Africa, and the US, and trying to talk about state violence and the ways that movements intersect. I think analytically, I disagree a little bit about movement building. I don't think Trump built a movement. I think Bernie Sanders built a movement. Trump was really created by a corporate media that gave him disproportionate coverage. And I think that that matters. I don't think that we should model ourselves. I think Trump, part of what made him possible, it's a Silvio Berlusconi model of politics, right? That's how a man can embody, you know, the anxieties around imperial decline for, as Bashkar said, the petty bourgeois, or, you know, let's just say, you know, a range of white Americans who are concerned about economic decline after having, you know, been the boss that fired everyone, I mean, that is about corporate media. That's not about, on the ground organizing, building a movement from the bottom up. This is not the new right in the early 70s. This is not Phyllis Schlafly. This is not, that's important. I think those historical distinctions matter when we think about movement building. But I think that the Bernie Sanders movement did build a movement, and they created new kinds of coalitions.
That woman is so Trump deranged.
Never received media coverage, and I interviewed some people involved in that, and you saw people like Larry Cohen from the communication workers. You saw them getting involved in the fight for, it was actually the fight for 12 in Birmingham, Alabama. That coalition between young people, millennials, the millennial portions of the African American community, 41% of Black millennials in South Carolina supported Bernie Sanders. For me, that's a more useful model. But I think trying to knit together some of the DAPL protests, knitting it together with the magical things that are happening in Chicago with BYP 100, Asada's daughters. Those are the people that got Anita Alvarez out of office and shook the base of Rahm Emanuel.
And just to intervene, this is what we're talking about, that, and I think it's quite a remarkable thing, that we have changed the identity and the focus of prosecutors in America because of really the Black Lives Matter movement and extensions from it. This is
Absolutely,
huge.
and BYP 100, because I think I mentioned BYP 100 because of very concrete organizing.
Okay. I will drink the fucking Hydra beer. God fucking damn it, Phil. God. You guys are incorrigible. Incorrigible. All right, let's drink the Hydra beer. Tom J, they are so close, but IQ around in 89. Maybe that's true. All right, let me get the Hydra beer. Hang on. For those of you who don't know, I am drinking some craft beer tonight because we missed happy hour yesterday. Now, I just drank my first beer, which was Pink Floyd, which was a pink lemonade sour, and it was delicious. But the chat, and particularly Phil, I was going to go with the lemon, Reagan. I was going to go with the lemon, but Phil and Gray and Bot have all demanded that I drink Das Hydra. Hang on, let me, as we're pouring this insane beer, Das Hydra. And this beer is a sour ale with blackberry puree, raspberry puree, lemon puree, marshmallow, graham cracker, and granola. All right, if you're drinking something fun, let us know what you're drinking in the chat. It is 10 p.m. on a Saturday. I hope you're drinking something fun while we're sitting here watching Socialism. Ooh, this beer just spit all over me. It smells so good. Oh my, it smells very lemony and raspberry-y as soon as I opened it. Let's take a look. Oh, that's a nice thick beer. Holy hell. Can you feel the thickness of that beer? That's legit. Like, you can see. I may have just had an orgasm drinking this beer. This is the most amazing thing I've ever tasted. I have never. This is amazing. Oh my God. You know what it tastes like? Do you guys know those pastries that has like the raspberry filling with that layer of cream and then like puff pastry, and they're like the cheapo pastries that you can get like the supermarket, but sometimes you can get them in really nice bakeries too. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Those pastries with like the raspberry cream and like the whipped cream filling, and then it's so good. That's what this tastes like. It doesn't even taste like alcohol. It smells like raspberry. I love beer so much. This is from This is what brewery is this from? Hang on, I need to give them credit. What is the name of your brewery? They don't have the name of the brewery. It's a collaboration with Mortalis, but I don't know what the original brewer is. Anyway, Das Hydra. That is a legit creation. Amazing. Amazing. I probably just did gain 5 pounds. I probably just did. That's true. All right, guys, let's get back into it. We got important business to tend to. We still got about an hour left of this presentation, and they're doing Q&A, which I actually like the Q&A better because it gives us insight into who's listening and what's on their mind. So I think that that's great. But guys, please mount that like button if you haven't already. This is Socialism Saturday, where we are watching legitimate socialists talk about their plans for all of us.
Goals, versus a political network. So the way I see anti-fascist organizing has a lot to do, it's centering it around, protesting against state violence, carceral state, but also I also think the DAPL and anti-fracking movement, because this is a place where everyone sees these images of amazing amounts of state violence. And I think that that's a good source of integrating multiple local struggles that do have larger regional networks.
Ken, do you want to throw something in on that? And then whoever's got the next question, we can get that.
So 3 or 4 points. So the question was, what is the future?
Hang on. I forgot Phil's super chat. Sorry, Phil. Have Victor thank me later. Cheers. Yes, Victor might be thanking you later. He might be. Victor might be asleep on the couch by the time we get done with this, if we're honest about it. But he can thank you tomorrow.
I feel like, not to be totally free associative, I feel like the future, which you brought up, is one of the questions, which is Trump's theme is about make America great again. So it's a sort of utopian ideal that returns to a mythic past. But then the people who are the precarious middle class, the people who can't imagine their children having jobs. And that's sort of I think maybe in the Naomi Klein climate change book, she talks about the hardest people to convince on climate change are those who have kids, because they can't deal with the thought of the future not being available for their kids. So there's something about the future that I think is actually the most stressful part of the Trump phenomenon, because I think this morning—
You can always have more than one orgasm, Brent.
Which is different than George W. Bush, is that we're not able to assess
not like
the
against the
impact
law or
on the
anything.
future, because we don't know if in a year there will be internment camps for Muslims and documented imprint, or if he'll simply be like Romney or something like that, and he won't have the TPP, stuff like that we might even agree with, So I think the stress is actually—
listen to this guy. He was like, Trump might do stuff we agree with. He might just be fine.
I think the second thing is everyone feels totally disempowered because Trump controls 3 branches, and but that sort of thing, and we have these very abstract things like class, race, what do these things even mean? And I think the question is, what is the space of a political act? And thinking about 3 branches or electoral college, it's thinking about not just electoral politics, but the national scale. And I think one thing that we're seeing is the city versus the nation. And there's a way where New York and San Francisco and other places are almost like city states that are exceptions to the federal condition.
One of the most looked up things today was secession.
I bet.
I'm not kidding. Whether the city of New York could succeed.
But in that
Hey, man, if the socialists want secession, then the libertarians should work with them on that shit. If the socialists are all like, how about we just all secede? Yes. Why don't we? Listen, what we've just learned is that the socialists were talking about national divorce. This is a good thing. Some might view this as bad. I do not. I think we need to be able to find common ground with these people.
I feel like we're like—
On the ballot in California, the California secession.
Really?
Well, it's entertained, the idea is.
There is a California secession
we're
movement.
Like the people
there
in
is.
the science fiction movie who live in the cloud cities, and then the real poor underclass is floating underneath.
Elysium.
Yes. But I think there's a question of what, I think a lot of people are going to go to a smaller scale.
Did you just hear that? They were okay. So if anyone has not seen the movie Elysium, basically Elysium is all of the rich people live on this satellite colony that's orbiting Earth, and all of the poor people live on Earth. Okay. And so what they just said is like, we're like the satellite people that are living up in the cloud colonies. And then there's everyone else. They literally just admitted that they're the people. They're the privileged. They just admitted it. Philip, he's saying things he wouldn't be allowed to now. Well, Ken has been the odd man out on this panel for the entire time. Ken's holding it down. I don't mind Ken at all.
Organizing, which is about forming like a counterpublic or doing like these sort of like very specific localized actions. And I think on the one hand, it's tricky because that's different than having like a popular front, which might not be possible in our lifetimes.
They are the bourgeoisie.
It is something that maybe you could have control over. Like there are all these things like CEDAW, where, you know, the United States would not sign on to treaties, but you could sign on at the local level. I think the other thing is we don't really know is Trump really an anti-institutional transformative force, or is he politics as usual? So there's certain things that are like purging civil servants that seems like a little bit more frightening, or the thing about like the nativism, you know, like I was a lawyer who defended a Black Ghanaian undocumented immigrant who was held by Homeland Security. My wife is Arab and was activist. So, I mean, my immediate thought was about safety, and I'm sure a lot of people felt that way, you know? So is it about safety, or is it just about like, you know, I don't like his tax policy, you know? Like, I think colonialism is one example of that, which is like, I think a lot of people, speaking for myself, like one of my big issues with Hillary was actually the hawkishness in Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan, which I don't know if the standard liberal really gives a shit about, but and in some of these points, Trump actually seemed better than Hillary. But then, of course, when he wins, the first call he gets is from Sisi in Egypt. And then the Israeli education secretary is like, the Palestinian state project is over as of today. Yeah. So in terms of the class project in these connections, like, I think I really liked what you were saying about these sort of like interesting.
I really think Ken might have voted for Trump. I agree. I agree, Bot. I think he might have voted for Trump. I really do.
Intersections, like on the
or
cultural
he didn't
side.
Vote at all.
I was texting today with my friend Mark Nowak, who is a poet, and he did this project where he did he used to be an SEIU organizer, but he did writing workshops with auto workers in Michigan, and then he did the same writing workshops with workers in, I think, Ghana, where their jobs were being outsourced to, and in both places, the Africans were like, these Americans get paid.
What is
the
alcohol percent on Hydra? It's only 6%.
Americans were like, these people are stealing our jobs. And then they had them write poems together. And so it created this sort of like solidarity through, you know, imagination that where they could then be allied against Ford, as opposed to, you know, seeing each other as this sort of divide and conquer like antagonists.
Trump's not going to do that.
No.
Who's got another question here? This is from Twitter, right?
Question. One of the immediate threats from a Trump administration is the redaction of DACA/DAPA. In what do we begin to fight this?
Ooh. I mean,
good.
This is a hard one for me.
Did everybody hear the question, understand what it was? No.
Who knows what DACA is in this room? Does everyone know?
Everyone knows what DACA is, right?
Walk us through. No, tell them.
Okay, so DACA is deferred action against.
She doesn't know what it is.
Childhood.
She doesn't know what it is.
Dreamers.
Yeah, it's basically like, if you're an undocumented.
Oh, hang on. Victor just came in to try this beer. Victor, you have to try this beer. It's called Das Hydra. You have to try it. It's amazing. I know you guys can't see Victor here. I want to see what he says.
Okay, that's good.
It's really good, isn't it?
It's almost like a smoothie.
It is like a smoothie. Victor said it was like a smoothie. Isn't that good? Aren't you glad that I made you come up and try it?
I'm surprised you made me try it.
It's really good. Das Hydra.
That's good.
It's with that fruit, the brownie batter beer company.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Anyway, that's all.
Okay.
Sorry, I had to. Oh no, we're not gonna put Victor on camera, guys. I just wanted him to try the beer. Okay.
Pop up if you want me to.
What's that?
can pop up if you want me to.
You want to smile into the camera?
No, like my hair is like.
That's all right. People
awful.
want to see you wave, Victor. Hang on.
Mhm.
Jump over the beer cooler.
Okay.
Hey guys, Victor's here. First time ever on stream.
My hair is crazy.
Everyone say hi to Victor. Mount the like button for Victor. All right, we got to get back to streaming now, Victor. Enough tomfoolery, enough nonsense.
I'm out of here.
Phil wants you to thank him for making me drink this beer.
All right, thank you, Phil.
Victor says thank you, Phil. All right, guys, enough nonsense. Thank you, Victor.
Young person in the United States. Essentially, Obama penned an executive action that gave you a temporary pathway to not citizenship, but somewhere in between.
But it was also, it was security. You had some security against threats, not huge.
I mean, it's an executive action. Yeah. So it's like security for this term, essentially.
And so Trump has said that he wants to just
Did he say this?
Well,
he's going to overturn.
Not necessarily. But he said he will rip up a host of Obama's executive orders.
Yeah.
Which he has power to do.
Right. And so my thing is when DACA was written into law, a lot of people had the critique or were concerned that this would be overturned immediately after his administration. And because of the nature of DACA, the way it works is that, you register, you have your photo taken. I think maybe you're fingerprinted. I'm not positive.
Very easily found.
You are incredibly easily found. And now, the worst case scenario is this is going to serve as basically a list for ICE. And, immigration is just going to go down this list and find all of these young people and systematically deport them. So that's like the absolute worst case scenario. And, I understand that question. I understand that fear. It's very real. What we can do is we can organize, ICE-free New York City is a local you can check out that you can give money and time and resources to. Resisting deportations is, it's a question of sometimes putting your body on the line. It's a question of like sanctuary. It's difficult because, Trump has pledged to triple the number of, ICE agents. Mm-hmm. He's pledged to work with local police departments.
And to eliminate, to literally go
eliminate sanctuary cities. Exactly. Yeah. Right. So New York City is a sanctuary city, and he's pledged to eliminate any federal funding for New York City if we don't, comply and basically turn over all of our undocumented immigrants and, fall in line with his agenda, which is really, really scary because we have, there's a lot of undocumented folks living in this city. I'm sure all of you know someone in this room. So yeah, as far as organizing against that, I think that we need to know rules as far as, what our civil protections are. And I think that we need to think through what we can do as far as like local laws around policing. Budgeting, like giving police permission to enact like a large surveillance mechanism. That's all like within our sort of like realm of governance. And, it was a little bit disheartening today to hear de Blasio say that he would be cooperating fully with our new president-elect. What does that mean? I don't know. But yeah, no, now is the time to like be a good ally.
Be a good ally, guys.
I don't really think in terms of like absolute worst terms, but hiding people, maybe. I don't know how bad it's gonna get. I don't know what degree of.
She thought Trump was literally Hitler, when it turns out that they were literally Hitler.
Fascism, he's going to like manifest. It's hard to say because his position has been so incredibly fluid, but
When DACA was first passed, and DACA is like awful, except it's better than deportation.
Exactly.
When DACA was passed, or when he signed the executive order, I think my immediate fear was like, so everyone is registered now, so the next time. And I think the logic was that there's an electoral bargain, which is that Republicans can reverse DACA without alienating the Latino voters who, now we know that that logic no longer makes sense. So I think that's truly terrifying. And I think a few things. One is that like it's important. I wish the left thought more about immigration and I wish like people of color thought about immigration in ways that were more class-based and not about as. Let me explain. So like not many people know that in New York City, the two groups with the highest poverty rate are actually Latinos and Asians. And it's actually because about a third of both populations are undocumented workers. So if you're in a taxi cab, if you are going to a Chinese restaurant, like the person there is probably an undocumented worker. So here class is very materialized in a way where there's a very specific person who's there as surplus labor. The other thing is I wish that there were more connections between Black Lives Matter and like the immigration prison industrial complex, which is like the fastest growing part of that. But what I will say is I thought of DACA the first thing.
See you, Deborah. Have a good one.
Trump. And I think part of it is that there really is no limit, I feel like. That is something, I'm really terrified that like the NEA and EPA and et cetera won't exist. But when
God,
Andrew
it would be
and I
great
went
if the NEA
to
didn't
Arizona
exist.
and started
Man,
Culture
that would've
Strike
been
with Jeff Chang
amazing.
and Fabiano Rodriguez, it is a race war there. And for example, if you go on YouTube, there's a speech with Joe Arpaio, who actually lost. That's one of the good news is from
We
last
should
night.
pause and say,
He's number 2 though on his list for Secretary of DHS.
yeah, but he's like really old. So yeah, I mean, maybe but this is just to not to interrupt this good thought, but to say we have been just speaking of an awful lot of dark and difficult stuff here. And at the federal level, that's true. At the local level, grassroots mass organizing
And now they
got
have
rid
Carrie
of
Lake.
probably the worst sheriff in the country, a guy who's been just brutal to immigrants, Joe Arpaio, in one of the largest cities in the country, Phoenix, defeated. That same sort of organizing has brought in a whole host of prosecutors who will actually, in many cases, be on the right side of these issues. We actually have a new prosecutor in Florida whose husband, I believe, or partner, has been
Florida
through the
worked
prison
out
system,
just great
is
for
out
them.
and that, but who has a deep personal experience. This is very different stuff.
Florida
we have
worked
Ilhan
out
Omar,
just
who has
great
been
for them.
elected in Minneapolis to the state legislature, the first Somali American Muslim immigrant woman ever elected to a legislature anywhere. And so there's a lot of stuff happening in an electoral sense, but we have a media that does not even begin to tell us all these things have just happened.
Yeah.
And so it makes us see electoral as this kind of like, wow, what do we ever possibly get out of that? We actually get a lot at a level that is functional, or that where we can intervene. And it is on things like this because Mayor de Blasio, I would suspect, should feel, so you're talking about what we can do, shouldn't we be talking at this level?
So Fish Addict, and I'm sorry for people who've been watching the whole time, but we do need to remind people when they join, this is a discussion that happened 2 days after the 2016 election. These are legitimate socialists. They don't look like your typical socialists, though some people in the audience do, but these are legitimate socialists. They were discussing anti-fascist organizing in the era of Trump, even though Trump had just won the presidential election. He wasn't even in office yet. And so what we're doing is we're watching what they said almost 6 years ago, and we're seeing how all that played out.
Level about issues like DACA and that directly to our elected officials.
If I could jump in really quickly, you asked me before about American Muslims and stuff. And the thing that I have noticed over the last couple of years is that the sort of allyship or the support, and granted it's been problematic in many ways, that American Muslims have gotten has actually come from the top. So it's actually been like the president, like people at the top, right, that have come and said, Muslims, look, we have Muslims, and they're not all armed, they're not all going to kill us, but it's come at the top, right? It's been terrible at the grassroots, right? But now the top is going away. Okay.
Right.
So the only kind of support that the Muslim community had broadly,
You know what?
sort of speaking.
Hang on. Brent is saying, and I know, Brent, you're probably joking, discount Bill Maher panel. Here's the thing. I don't even care about watching Bill Maher anymore because Bill Maher is like 7 steps removed from what's going on at the grassroots level. What I'm really interested, what I'm really interested in watching now is mostly just like, it's the activists, it's the organizers, because like the influencers are several steps removed from what happens actually on the ground. And so when you're talking about like someone on Bill Maher, like they're coming late to the ball game. These people have already moved on to 17 other things by the time that Bill Maher is even talking about it. So we need to get as close as possible to the people who are actually driving the conversation. And that is never the influencers. People have really got to understand this. The blue check influencers, the people on TV, the people with millions of followers, they are several steps removed from what's actually going on. They are not the doers, they are the commentators. If you want to know where things are going, you have to get as close to the grassroots level as you possibly can. Because what these people talk about today, the influencers will be talking about 6 months from now, a year from now. These are the early adopters. The influencers are not.
Speaking was sort of at the sort of larger level in American politics. That's disappearing. The grassroots is terrible. So it's really critical, you know.
And also Bill Maher is an
that
elitist
somebody
shill who is
steps
out of
in.
touch. Yes.
And it's not going to happen at the top level, frankly. So it needs to happen at the grassroots level to support this community that has been vilified, not just over the last 18 months, but over the last 16 years. You know, this is a point that I wish I had made earlier when you asked the question, and it like occurred to me, whoa. I mean, like, this is an important point to make that is hopefully very obvious. This is not new, and none of this is new, right? But this is really not new. And this has become tested, like small group sessions, large group sessions, like focus group sessions. This works. This works. It works very effectively. Yeah. So, and now that this community is truly without any allies, really, visible political allies, it becomes that much more incumbent on people who consider themselves to be people of solidarity and justice. And
people of solidarity. What an interesting phrase.
Or something we want to throw in. Yes, come on.
Hi, thanks for organizing this.
Thanks to Verso for putting it.
Yeah. Wait, I wrote this down. Sorry. Okay, great.
Not a real socialist.
Professor Murch.
Yeah.
When you talk about what's new about Trump, one thing I didn't hear mentioned was that Trump uses the words working class. You know, Clinton uses the words working families. So I guess, is there any significance in this difference for the panel? Does that matter to the left? Relatedly, there's been a lot of talk of organizing.
His outfit has a color. He's combed his hair.
Was that he had other work to do, but not that he fundamentally disagreed with the Democratic
Even wearing
Party
a colorful
politics.
undershirt.
So my question for the panel
Not
is,
true believer.
what do they make of the fact that Trump had basically no organizing campaign? Can we chalk up the absence of left politics as a question of organizing? So there's like this emphasis on grassroots organizing. So what does the left have to transform? What ideas do we have to transform working class politics in this country and internationally?
That's an excellent set of questions, not just one. Professor Murch, you get to
I'll try to
grab
start.
your best shot there.
A lot to say there. Trump using the term working class.
Trump doesn't care about the working class. He's a billionaire, but not really.
The kind of right-wing populism of Ronald Reagan and Pat Buchanan was extremely important. So I think that there are precedents for what Trump did. I really do think he took a big part of his playbook from Pat Buchanan. I don't even know if he knows that.
Oh, I doubt he does, but I think Pat is well aware of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a part of Trump, you know, his own precarious relationship with with language, which things are transmitted to him and he doesn't even remember the origin of it and he misquotes it, but it's still
like a quote from Mussolini.
Like a quote from Mussolini, exactly. But you know, of course, he swam in that soup. and the soup of Ronald Reagan and Pat Buchanan, and and he's not a stupid man. He took a line from the playbook of economic nationalism, which is deeply mobilizing. So I missed so much of the earlier discussion. I'm afraid I'm probably going to repeat things that people have already discussed.
We'll tell you.
Okay, good. Just stop me. Just stop me if it's already been said or it's too obvious. But the corporatism of Clinton Democrats and the sense of entitlement that made Hillary Clinton in particular, why wasn't she campaigning in Wisconsin? Why wasn't she campaigning in these Rust Belt states? I didn't follow, because I was truly a Bernie supporter, and I was, minute by minute, tweet by tweet, Facebook by Facebook, YouTube by YouTube. Sometimes I went and spoke out in Nevada. So I was following the campaign very, very intensely up until the end of the Democratic National Convention. And then after that, I just couldn't stand it. So there are huge portions of the election that I missed. But, for my own lifetime, it's separate from being historian, seeing the class mobilization of the Bernie campaign was really profound. So I think if I had to talk about a real use of working class, it was the Sanders campaign. And I want to say that the Sanders campaign was not as white as people think it was. I met all the Black organizers. They had Marcus Farrell, who was the head of African American Outreach. And interestingly enough, given what's going on right now in Clark County, I met all the Black organizers at Clark County because they had a huge get out the vote effort in Clark County where they basically invited a bunch of Black leftists to talk about Bernie. And we had a wonderful conversation. You got to meet everybody. And that full story hasn't been told. So I don't know if that answered the question, but I'll start up there with the question of, Trump appropriated the language of economic nationalism and made that into a way of thinking about working class. But I'm unwilling to racialize working class because you look at the rate of labor participation among Latinos, the problem of people being undocumented, and this is a core. I lived in Southern California for 2 years, and seeing those colonial relationships with Latinos in Southern California, that's the true working class, particularly of the Southwest. So, it's the Breaking Bad dilemma. White men and white people in general are suffering economic decline, but I think it is a mistake to confuse white economic decline with the embodiment of class. What do we do with the shifting demographics of the United States, and particularly with the Black and Latino populations to me have different relationships because of the scale of Black criminalization and the ways that Black people, poor and working class Black people, are being shut out of the economy, have been over the last 50 years in such profound ways. It's very different than during the Jim Crow era. But, opening up what working class is and not allowing white working class to stand in for working class, but at the same time to acknowledge the profound downward mobility that we are all facing.
Ken is
Ken
is checking his phone
for that question, and then
he's so bored. He's so over this.
Question I might want to throw in here because I want to. We're winding toward a point where we're going to let people do some final things. But before we do that, I had an uncle. Oh, do we? Yeah, let me take you in just 1 second. Let me grab, and then you're going to be our last question. So I want you to be really fabulous. I want you to form it and think. It's going to be the best question you have ever heard. It's going to be amazing. But I had an uncle who in 1968 voted for George Wallace. And he lived in the, kind of the center city of Racine, Wisconsin. And in 1984, he voted for Jesse Jackson. And it seemed absurd to everyone but him. And to him, it was just like, I'm really mad. I'm so mad about so many things. I just want the guy who's going to stir it up. I want the person who's going to push back against a lot of powerful people. And he voted for Jackson again in '88. And so I'm wondering, and anybody can grab a piece of this, but I'm wondering where, when we talk about working class and kind of lower income people, this line, where it comes in. I mean, is Trump the end of it? Is Trumpism it? Or are these people, are they there now because nobody else spoke to them? Are they so become part of a rainbow coalition, or so neglected that they went to the worst possible place? Give me some sense of who we're talking about here, or give us all some sense of that. And I'm genuinely struggling here.
Well, one thing I want to point out is I believe that people who made under 30,000 a year actually did not vote for him and turned out overwhelmingly for Clinton. And I think these are people that depend on the social safety net in significant ways and knew that they would be without a lot of protections that they depended on from day to day. So when we say working class, you know, how poor do we mean?
Yeah.
Basically.
I mean, I think it's also about, so why do people get angry? I think people usually get angry when they feel like they deserve something and they don't get it, right? So I think there's this sense of
you mean how you guys freaked out for 4 years after you lost an election?
Definitely been frustrated. But again, why has it been frustrated? And it might be that the answer isn't always like the Trump. Maybe the answer is sometimes the Jackson, but I think we still need to think about why are they upset? What is it about, this group of voters that got them so angry? Sort of the question of why are we terrorized by certain things and not others? Or why is this the thing?
And we would tell them, and we inform them, the guy that they're interested in, has done some incredibly.
Right.
He's a grifter, right? He's like
also a billionaire.
Yeah, he's a grifter billionaire.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. He's a billionaire cheat.
Yeah, he has to pay taxes. I mean, we keep giving them all this information, and they're just like, I'm sorry, I'm still going to do it. And so that becomes a different game, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It's anger.
These people are so bent that Trump is using perfectly legal tax loopholes to take deductions because they just want everyone's money to all belong to the state. He doesn't even pay his taxes. Well, why do you care? Why do you care? Do you feel entitled to his money, which you did not earn? Do you feel like the government is entitled to his money, which it did not earn? These people just want all of us to give all of our money to them.
But it's also, I'm locking in here, and that's what I'm interested in.
So the object, right, maybe doesn't matter, right?
So I'm wondering.
Maybe it doesn't.
I think that there are different types of political anger. Okay. There's the political anger of entitlement, of racism, of white supremacy, and there's also the political anger of injustice.
Ken just rolled his
that I
eyes.
think can also be rooted in hope.
Ken,
when
the hero we need.
Leftist campaigns, it was an old leftist shibboleth that repression breeds resistance. But I don't think that's entirely true. What really breeds resistance is a combination of repression and also resources. Resources are extremely important. And so there are different kinds of anger. I'm careful about that because to me, it's connected to, it's not so much true of this generation, but for my generation, especially for baby boomers, that argument about the 1960s that the left and the right meet in the middle. And that's an argument about political extremism and anger. But, particularly having
But your chat made me think, you know who these people are? With the exception of Ken, Asian writer Ken, we like him. I'm not including him in this assessment. Do you know who these people are? These are the champagne socialists. That's why. This doesn't feel like a normal socialism talk. These people are socialists. But they're like the champagne socialists where they're like, I think they kind of probably theoretically believe in it, but they're not like the socialists that we've been watching all week. These people do have a different vibe. She's like, she knows, even though I don't actually think this would happen, but that college professor knows that if they ever got their little revolution, she'd be at the top of the heap. She knows she ain't losing her status. These are the champagne socialists.
Growing up where I did, houses were firebombed when Black families tried to move in when people still had unionized jobs. And we got to remember that this history of racial violence predates deindustrialization. Right? It was at the height, during World War II, when you have union wages, American economy is booming. It's the war industry that brought the US out of the Depression. This is when we see white workers rioting and killing Black workers because they don't want to desegregate the shop floor. It's important to remember that history. Anger is not only born out of loss, anger is also born out of entitlement. And I think, to me, Trump is the essence of entitlement. In terms of thinking about working class movement, there's a lot we learned from Bernie. I think we can also, like in all political organizations, social movements, learn from our mistakes. And there were moments, and I supported Bernie a lot, but there were moments that were absolutely excruciating. When he was in Detroit and said, someone asked him a question about race and class, and he said, I don't know what it's like to live in the ghetto. That was a terrible mistake. He actually proceeded then to make a wonderful analysis of structural racism, which no one noticed because everyone was smarting from his discussion of the ghetto. And I would like to see some of the same kinds of coalitions and politics that were nurtured in the Bernie movement, but that have been able to reflect a working class politics that incorporates fully multiple people. And I think that mattered, like Bernie and Jeff Weaver at the top. There were Black organizers, but I think
Amber, we watched that 2 weeks ago. We already watched it.
The Sanders campaign accomplished incredible things, but I think there were times where, for example, his way of reaching out to Black voters was only by talking about mass incarceration. Why?
Oh, Nathaniel, thank you for the super chat. Iron law of woke projection. The left was so upset regarding Trump's victory because they thought there could be no disruption to the continuation of leftism after Obama. Yeah, that's exactly right, Nathaniel. I absolutely agree with you on that. That's why they say they're basically projecting their own nonsense onto Trump voters. Yeah, all good, Amber. No worries. But Soylent Green is a great movie, and if you haven't watched Soylent Green lately, you definitely should. It's even based in 2022, but we just watched it a couple weeks ago for movie night. But we will be watching Demolition Man for movie night tomorrow, and if you would like to join us, then you need to become a supporter, either by going to activelyounwoke.com/support and joining Patreon, Locals, Substack, whatever, or by donating to the campaign to train 10,000 parents how to find out what the schools are teaching their kids with publicly available information, and you'll be able to join us for all movie nights moving forward in the supporter Discord.
Why wasn't there a link between race and finance, race and subprime mortgages? Sometimes he talked about it, but why wasn't he talking about it in Detroit?
Why wasn't it central?
Why wasn't it central? So that's just one example. So I think suturing together some of these ways that we understand class, that's why I emphasize also DAPL and fracking and the extraction of resources. One of the things I find myself these days talking a lot about is the politics of extraction, because I think that brings together everything. It brings together climate change and big energy, but also a way to talk about incarceration.
No, but Logan's Run is definitely on my list.
Resources from people, as a way to talk about very deeply grounded materialist interests that link to class, but try to separate it from some of our historical and racialized iconography of class.
Ladies and gentlemen, the best question you'll ever hear.
Ooh, why is video not available?
I'm from Denmark, and
what?
One
Can
of
you
the
guys
things
hear the
that
sound?
frightens me a lot about the election of Trump is you have the U.S. What is it? 40% colored people, maybe more, 45% colored people.
People of color.
People of color. Sorry.
He has to be edited out, probably.
I don't know the vocabulary, so
I think it's a little, a bit down, but a substantial portion of our population.
So we have maybe less than 5% people of color in Denmark, and so if Trump can happen here, what are we to expect in the next 10, 15 years in Northern Europe?
Well, but isn't it? Stick with us for a second.
Yeah.
Isn't it also true that there are already in most European countries movements of what we would call the far right that incorporate many elements of what we talk about with Trump?
Yeah, but they make it like 30% of the vote, but not 55 or like.
Well, Trump only got 47, so he's still
right.
Yeah.
Right.
But your point is.
So what I'm saying, maybe this panel are not expert in European politics, but maybe you can say something about is there something about America that makes this exceptionally, a victim to the Trumpism that we see?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I've mentioned is the first Black president
there it goes.
in a country that was founded on slavery. I think that's a huge part to do with it, to be honest. Yeah. It's a white lash. Like Van Jones said.
It was racism.
Term, right? And now we're going to deal with this. But you should extend on that for 1 second. First Black president followed immediately by
the first serious female candidate. Yeah.
But she's rejected.
Yeah, she got the popular vote. So what do we mean by rejected? She's
was
rejected by
all
the Electoral College. Yes.
She was a woman.
All right.
Right, rejected by this system that you said we've had since slavery times that was meant to sort of quell
Oh, because she was a
populism,
woman.
I guess, in a sense. So it's, you know, it's a bit of a contradiction that we think of Trump as this populist candidate. Again, I would challenge people to think through what that means exactly, like populist in what sense, like, yeah.
Let's take us around for a quick round before we let people go off into that good night. Are we doomed, or how's it go?
How many people feel like you're in the apocalypse? Raise your hand.
What's it feel? This is a substantial apocalypse caucus here right now, man.
It looks like half.
Was this? And it was just like third sign of the apocalypse, fourth, which, right? So,
I think we all feel a lot of fear, and I think that part of what this panel is about actually is intellectualizing our response and coming up with an analysis.
Which is kind of good, right?
And it's a way, it's a psychological defense system. And
Yeah,
I realized I could read pieces, I could have a good critique, I could do action, collaborate, but these are all psychological defenses to not feel devastated. And I think I felt like to go back to the previous question, there are two things that I thought were really profound. Like, one thing was this idea of the working class. And I think it's sort of about what this election was about, which is how do you imagine the polity or the public, you know? So like Occupy has a 99%, the like Democrats that we never believed always talked about the middle class, you know, they rarely talked about poor people. And Trump had a very convincing public, like the people there believed they were part of his version of America. And I think the other question was sort of about, I'm kind of being boring, like Bernie would have been awesome, right? I think everyone thinks that. But the other question is like, I think we all were like, the Democrats have sophisticated, you know, neural nets, and they have this get out the vote.
They must know what they're doing.
Well, it's not just technocracy, but they have.
No, but I think a lot of people thought they must know what they're doing.
Well, the thing of Trump having no offices, right?
Yeah.
Like that seemed impossible. So I think the question was like, if Trump could win without any mass movement, then can the left win without a mass movement? And I think what's interesting is like how we keep talking about emotions, like the fear, people using Trump as an avatar to feel successful. You know, like there's like this really amazing Radiolab piece that was a Black gay guy who was the head of like Youth for Trump. And it's because he wanted to be like the powerful person. It was this sort of will to power. And there's a way where Trump is his avatar, where you project your desires and your like, you know, it makes you realize how much emotions are a part of it, and how I guess the question I have, I don't have I feel like we failed as a panel because we intellectualized it. We didn't actually offer anti-fascist organizing or imaginative solutions. But
I
what
agree
I kind
with
of felt
him.
like was
Hang
interesting is that
I actually agree. I really agree with him. I was expecting something very, 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 very different from this panel than what emerged. I really wanted to hear about the anti-fascist organizing. I wanted to hear what their plans were, and maybe it does. Oh, hey, Brian, good to see you. Maybe it was that they only had a couple days, and so they didn't have their shit together yet. Like, we definitely started to hear some of the things in this panel that did eventually make their way into reality, like the voting laws and the get out the vote and the anti-racism and the stuff like that. And so they were starting, I think, at this point to wrap their heads around it. But I 100% agree with Ken. Ken, again, the hero we need. I 100% agree with him that this panel was not about anti-fascist organizing. I was expecting something much more socialist from this panel. I'm a little disappointed. It's Socialism Saturday. I feel like I failed you guys. We will find much more deeply socialist content as the week progresses. I promise you that. I've got so many options for us to watch. It's ridiculous. Like, we're not doing this Verisol books from now on. We're going back to Haymarket books where the real socialists are. But I do think that there's probably better panels that we can find about legit anti-fascist organizing. And if anyone happens to come across videos about that on YouTube or elsewhere, please let me know, because I want to watch them. I legitimately, I said this earlier, but just in case there are new people here, I really want to find. I would bet all of the money in my bank account right now that there is some video out there on some obscure socialist website that's gotten like a couple hundred views, where there is some sort of confession or admission about what they did. I am convinced of this, These people have such hubris. They talk about their plans in the open. We just need to find it. And it's going to be on some obscure channel that no one has ever heard of and no one watches. But we're going to find it. We're going to find it eventually. And wouldn't that be amazing?
This question of all these emotions.
See, the thing, and I promise we're going to let them finish in a second, but the thing that I've learned about like investigating the schools and about doing this stuff on YouTube is that these people really do put everything in the open. But there are no real journalists anymore. Real journalism is dead. And so no one is looking for this stuff. It all exists out in the open. Their plans are out in the open. All we have to do is find it. That's it. All we have to do is find it. And I disagree with this. I disagree with this entirely. We find this shit on school websites every single day. It is out there. It's out in the open somewhere. Someone has it. And they haven't even thought about it because they have such absolute hubris. It's on some obscure socialism channel or like on Vimeo or even maybe like one of the real alt-tech platforms. We just need to find it. That's it. No, this is not Project Veritas. No. Again, you guys aren't tracking. We find every single day that they tell us what they're doing. The Time magazine article was a confession, guys. It was a confession. They literally told us what they did. And that was in Time effing magazine. Can you imagine what exists on some obscure socialist YouTube channel? Where they maybe, 1,000 subscribers, maybe not even that. Most of the content on the internet is never watched or watched by very few people. All we have to do is find it. Oh, I wouldn't be sure of that. No, Andy No's not looking for this content. No, this is what you got. This is the mistake you guys make. You think the journalists are out there looking for this shit? No, they aren't. They aren't. Now, I'm not going after Andy No. I think Andy No is fabulous. I think he's fantastic. I think he's really, really good. But you guys really need to understand, there are no real... I don't even think... Andy No is probably one of the most credible conservative journalists. Andy No is not looking for the content that I'm talking about. He is not looking for it. He is looking for other things. He is looking for mugshots. He's looking for people at these protests. He's not looking for this content. Like, here is where people go wrong. You guys always think that these journalists are out there actually behaving like journalists. They are not. They are not. They are propagandists. Nothing more. Andy No, as great as I think he is, and as fabulous as I think his book is, and as critical as I think his work is, Andy No is a partisan, is partisan. He is. Andy No has a point of view. Andy No is trying to make a point. Andy No is looking for content that is helping Andy No prove the point he wants to make. The post-millennial is a propaganda rag. The post-millennial does zero real journalism. Zero. So again, I think Andy No's work is great, but he's not doing what I'm talking about. And I think a lot of people forget that there is no one coming to save you. There is no one doing this. No one. How many things have I exposed just by looking at school websites? It all exists out there, guys. It all exists out there. All we need to do is find it. That is it.
That we're feeling and emotions, like how race and class intersect with these symbols and emotions. I guess my question is, maybe I don't have the answer on the left, but maybe a way to get to the answer is a question of when.
Sorry, one more thing. Yeah, I just want to bounce off what Andrew's saying here because I feel like I'm making like a really good point, and I don't want to disrupt Ken because again, Ken is the hero we need. Very few people are looking for it. It's passed around in these little groups, so smart people that can discredit it can't find it. But it's even more than that, Andrew. It's even more than that. The content that people who claim to be journalists, the content that they pay attention to is already going viral on Twitter. If the content isn't going viral on Twitter, these journalists do not pay attention to it. They do not consider it important because their goal, their only goal, is clicks and shares. That is it. It is only clicks and shares. That is it. So if content isn't already going viral, they ain't looking for it. They're not. Boston Children's Hospital is a great example of this. Boston Children's Hospital was doing God knows how many surgeries for years on minors on their website, videos all over the place. Now there are people looking into what Boston Children's Hospital is doing, but that stuff was sitting out there in the open for years. They were doing it in the open for years. And no one looked for it because there was no there yet. And then one woman found it and she made a big deal of it. And then it started going viral on Twitter. And then guess what happened? Everyone started looking into Boston Children's Hospital. But it was not until one person found the content that had been out there for years on their website, for years on their YouTube channels, for years at their symposiums where they were filming everything. It wasn't until one person took the time to look, to find it, and then put it on Twitter and made it go viral, and then everyone else started looking. The Seattle Public Schools right now have videos on the Seattle Public Schools website where they are reading books to 5-year-olds about trans teddy bears. We are literally right now the only people looking into that. Why? It hasn't gone viral on Twitter yet. Because conservatives hate me and they won't share my content. But you know what? Fuck them. Fuck them. We don't need them. Because we already found it. What happened? The Burlington schools are another example of this. The Burlington schools were putting 12-year-olds on the internet talking about how they came out to their guidance counselors in the 5th grade. That content was on the internet for months and no one found it because no one was looking for it until I found it one day and then it went viral on Twitter. And then guess what? People started looking into it and they started sharing it because they got likes and retweets and all that stuff that they crave. All of this content is out there. All of it is out there. All we need to do is find it. That's it. All we need to do is find it. And then expose it. And then whatever happens, happens. And sometimes things go viral and sometimes they don't. And there's nothing we can do about it. Nothing we can do at that point. But if you guys think that people are looking for this stuff, you are wrong. They are not. They're I can count the number of people on both my on my 2 hands. I don't even need my toes. Don't even need them. That are actually out there hunting for this content and doing the journalism that the goddamn journalists should very well be doing, but they're not doing it because they're fucking around on Twitter.
When was the last time you were moved by something that happened politically? Like, we were all really moved by Trump because he just killed us, you know? But I saw Bernie at Prospect Park and he was like this big in the distance, but...
Oh, hang on. I'm doing way more about what's actually going on in the classrooms than James Lindsay is. No offense to James Lindsay. James Lindsay is great. If you want information about what's actually going on in the classrooms, I'm doing that content right now. Chris Rufo kind of does it every once in a while. But if you want the real deal, I'm one of the only people doing that content right now. James Lindsay's not doing it. James Lindsay's talking about ESG. Again, no shade on James Lindsay. James Lindsay is amazing. He is a warrior. I value him so much. Words cannot express how critical James Lindsay is. But he is not doing the content that you're looking for. I am.
I like almost wept, and like seeing the like neighborhood organizing campaign in Arizona, like that was really moving. And I think for the Trump supporters, there's something very moving about Trump, and whereas none of us, I think, was moved by Hillary at any point. And there's a range of emotions. He
definitely voted for Trump.
Like a range of different angers. And, you know, there needs to be real politics, like organizing and unions and stuff like that. But I think that's sort of what I'm thinking about, which is that Bernie, you know, almost defeated the Clinton machine based on small votes because it's so moving. And
James
he
Lindsay's
projected
not
a kind of moral force of integrity.
I wouldn't say James Lindsay is a good investigator. James Lindsay doesn't investigate things like that. James Lindsay reads their literature. But a lot of the stuff, and again, this is no shade on James Lindsay. James Lindsay's fucking awesome. A lot of the stuff that James Lindsay reads and shares are stuff that he's sent by other people. He's not the one doing the investigating. He's the literature, yes. The foundational literature, yes, he's doing that. But a lot of the general like news and content stuff, he's being sent that by other people.
Integrity, which is not, it sounds like so stupid and old-fashioned, you know, but there's something very moving. I think that all of us, we felt like chumps afterwards, maybe, like we believed, you know, and people believed in Obama, even when he was saying that he would increase troops. But what was it about this projection of integrity and sympathy and desire? There's something interesting happening there.
Emotion, human side. Doomed? Where are we at?
I'm in shock.
You're in
I'm
shock.
still in shock.
I think shock is a pretty strong one right now.
Yeah, I do feel actually like I'm in shock. I only got 2 hours of sleep and had to get up early and teach.
Did anybody sleep all night? Anyone in the room who actually like went to bed like at, you did. And look how fresh and lively, you're good and strong. But like most of us, actually, this is something, we've been through something.
We've been through something, yeah, and I haven't had a chance to sit and read and, you know, kind of assess, so that's part of it. I'm just still going on my impressions at 3 a.m. And my growing panic and inability to focus. I'm not sure what's going to happen, I'll be honest. This year, and the past year and a half, has deeply destabilized how I thought I understood American politics. I genuinely did not think that Trump was not, let alone, I never even imagined he could become president, but that he would even be the Republican nominee, I thought was absolutely impossible. And I was certain about that. And so, as I said, I think a lot of that had to do with region, living in the New York area, and remembering Trump as a laughingstock who went bankrupt 3 times. So I didn't see him the way he was seen from the point of view of reality television, because I do think that this was a Berlusconi-like victory. It was really a victory of you know, The Apprentice. I'm trying to think about things that would be useful to say about organizing. I think Trump has laid bare a number of things, and that we did learn a lot of lessons from the Bernie campaign. I think that remains a very important mobilizing tool, separate from what happened after the Democratic National Convention. And what I found so compelling about it was just hearing people talk in the most concrete ways about the depth of how important economic issues are to them. And I think that I haven't seen that done in electoral politics since Jesse Jackson. And so I think, you know, we need an independent organizing wing. We have these radical movements that people were talking about, the anti-carceral movement, you know, anti-state violence movement. We have the anti-deportation movement. We had the anti-fracking movement, these independent movements that I think are extremely important. I also do think electoral activism is important. One of the questions I asked my students today, because I like to just ask students and listen, and they said a lot of things that I had no idea, because I don't hang out with 18-year-olds. And they said one of the biggest things they said that surprised me, and they were talking about people, and I teach at Rutgers, which is a relatively progressive school, and because of the things I teach,
They're
I have
all
pretty
relatively progressive,
very, very
honey.
progressive, even some hardcore left students in my classes.
All
And they were
relatively
talking about how a
progressive.
lot of people their age supporting Trump saw Trump as a joke, and they talked always about him as a joke, and that was their way of talking about their own uttered separation from electoral politics. And I asked them when we were talking about the distinction between the popular vote and the electoral college, I said, is this something that would mobilize you to think about the electoral college? And they all said yes. So I think that in addition to talking about these important
they're going after the
movements,
electoral
which
college.
I support,
You guys,
those are
like,
things I spend my
hang
time,
on.
participating in.
Now, the left has been going after the electoral college for years, but it really did obviously ramped up after Trump. But make no mistake, guys, they're still going after it. They're still going after the electoral college. If you guys think that electoral college is safe, I don't know what to tell you. You're not watching the same movie I am. And everyone's got to be prepared for that.
And in studying, I actually think the fight for electoral reform is extremely important on multiple levels, whether it's getting rid of superdelegates. That's the biggest thing we learned from Bernie. I mean, superdelegates grew out of the backlash against Jesse Jackson. It's not just since time immemorial going back to the Federalist Papers, just like the Democratic Leadership Council was a response to the democratization of the Democratic Party in 1968. So I think a combination of radical movements, but also some organized fights for electoral reform at the local and state level, I think that really matters. And I was part of the Working Family Party way back when, what they did with the Rockefeller drug laws, which is a precedent for what you're talking about with prosecutors. So I think that the electoral piece also matters, but electoral and radical politics are actually not separate. You can do both, and I think we need both.
Understand the emotions of this, look at some structures, look at things that we can address while still sorting through our shock. Doomed?
Yes, we're doomed.
All right, good, finally.
That's all I have to say.
No.
I mean, I do think that, so I think it's important to always rethink categories, right? How we define categories. For a lot of us, the sort of Arab Spring made us rethink what a revolution means. I think from my perspective, what's happened here should at least make us think about how we think about what movements mean. I still think this was a movement, even if the way it was consolidated and coalesced was very much dependent upon very elite structures. He didn't need offices, right? So, and it wasn't just the media that made it so that he didn't need offices. You had people that were galvanized. So I think there's something to be learned from Donald Trump. Hopefully, a lesson that can actually benefit a movement that has a more inclusive message, and that isn't actually hopeless, right? Like Donald Trump shouldn't have become president of the United States, and Donald Trump's surrogates, the people working his campaign.
She's the one that talked about entitlement.
By and large, by what happened, right? This was improbable. And even though he was a billionaire, and even though he was part of the elite class, he didn't pour a ton of money into this. The campaign that should have won lost. And lost
she was
big.
The one
and
that was talking about
that was
entitlement.
Totally improbable won, right? So I think that in and of itself, I mean, I think both of you spoke very eloquently about sort of some of the more specifics, but to sort of give maybe more of like a hopeful cast to all of it. If this can happen, it almost seems like anything can happen, So I think simply a matter, the thing that worries me is that after a couple of weeks, it won't seem so bad and that no one will care anymore. That's what worries me. Yeah, that it'll become normalized. And a lot of, when I said earlier,
they made sure that didn't happen. That was their biggest worry. They made sure that didn't happen. They kept this top of mind every single day. They were relentless. Guys, I'm going to be blunt. Well, I'm always blunt. Republicans have gone to fucking sleep. Republicans are asleep. The GOP is asleep. The base is asleep. Everyone is asleep. Republicans right now if they were smart, and I say this as someone who will never vote for another Republican in my life because of how betrayed, well, not just because of how betrayed I feel by them, also because I just generally don't agree with many of their ideas, especially the ideas that have come out since Biden got in office. But I'm going to say this as someone who will never vote for Republicans again in my life. They have fallen asleep at the wheel. I saw James Lindsay a couple weeks ago on Truth Social say something to the effect of, Republicans have learned helplessness. As soon as they lost, they whined and whined and whined, and then they said, well, I guess there's nothing we can do about it. They always cheat anyway, and there's just nothing we can do, and even if we vote next time, they're going to cheat, and then they went to sleep, and they stopped trying. Republicans have not been trying since Biden entered office. They have not been even trying, not remotely. These people, from 2 days after Donald Trump won the election in 2016, they never stopped. They never let up. They were working every single day to do everything they could possibly think of to ensure that it never happened again. Every single day. They never let it become normalized. They never stopped. Okay, they may have had moments of complaining about it and feeling entitled, as this woman did earlier, but guess where she ended at? We can't let this be normalized. That's where she ended at. The reason that they win, the reason that the literal socialists are dictating the agenda, the reason that the literal socialists are the ones dictating CNN's talking points, the reasons that we heard things mentioned in this presentation that most of us hadn't heard of in 2016, but guess what? Our common talking points today, the reason that all that is true is that they never stop, they never give up, they never take their toys and go home, which is what Republicans do every single effing time. And Republicans are still showing us, by the way, that they've learned nothing from what happened in 2020. Not a damn thing. After Donald Trump won in 2016, they scrambled to put together this panel in 2 days. They were already planning. Republicans, well, I guess, we lost. What can you really do? Why don't we create our own parallel economy, even though that's not going to happen either because there aren't enough people to support that? I don't know what more to tell people. Republicans don't want to win. The GOP doesn't want to win. And even though between the two parties, I think the GOP might be just marginally better, although worse on many things, but just marginally better, they're never going to get my vote because they don't want to win. And I'm a very big fan of, you get what you fucking deserve. If you want to put in no effort, if you just want to whine and complain and take your toys to go home, if you want to sabotage yourself, if you want to spit in the faces of people who could have voted for you, then you don't deserve to win. I'm sorry. I may not like these people. I don't like these people at all. I think their ideas are stupid. But they deserve to win because they show up and fight for it every single day, even after they suffered one of the most devastating losses of their lifetime. They didn't make themselves a victim. They may have whined and complained and acted like it, publicly, but then what they do, they got their asses together and they organized and they collaborated and they communicated with each other and they went out and they actually did things. They didn't just whine and complain on Twitter all fucking day. That's why they win. Because they show up and they do things. Do not believe ever that you're going to win if you're just sitting behind a keyboard all day. That is not going to work.
That Obama's speech was terrible, it's because for me it normalized a lot of this stuff. So I think actually the struggle isn't so much can we achieve this, but do we go back to the status quo? Do we go back to, oh, it's fine. What's he really gonna do? This was probably just, I was on the subway coming here and there were a bunch of women, minority women, standing around saying, oh, his speech was great.
Yes.
Yeah, Donald Trump's speech was great. He said unity. She was just the things that he said before he was just saying to get elected. It's already happening, you know. We need to realize that we might not feel it in our everyday lives, right? But something is happening, you know, and trying to keep that alive, I think, is the real struggle. That feeling that this is actually, even if we don't feel it and see it, we feel it right now. But are we going to feel it 2 months from now? We can't be relying on that feeling. If we are, then I don't think anything will happen. Then we're doomed.
Get to that emotional core, the structural changes, the structural challenges. Don't neglect that we ought to make this system work. In crisis, there is a certain element of hope. It is that pivotal point, that critical juncture, even if it turns bad for a moment, that makes the possibility there might be a next critical juncture. And now, are we doomed?
No, I don't think so. I guess I will say that yes, local elections, local politics, local electoral politics are important. I think that pragmatic radicalism is important, that these two aren't exclusive, like Donna said. I also think that, you know, when we talk about the left versus the right, we're talking about a coalition on one side and basically a unified set of interests on the other side. So it's really important to actually think through solidarity. It's really important to remember how to help each other in this moment, and to really be about that. One thing that I think we mentioned over and over again, but didn't actually maybe name explicitly, was the plight of refugees in this country. I am the daughter of refugees.
Hang on. Scott Presler has not adopted a defeatist attitude. Scott Presler is telling you people the truth and you're not fucking listening. Scott Presler, for the first time last week, came out and told Republicans the truth, which is that there will not be a red wave in November because Republicans have not done shit. They refuse to do anything. That's not a defeatist attitude. That was telling you the truth. Scott Presler should have told you guys that months ago. But no, when he does say Republicans like push back on saying, Scott, that's not true, be optimistic. Scott Presler has no reason to be optimistic. Scott Presler is actually one of the very few people out there every single day in the real world. And he keeps a positive face on, and he finally told you guys the truth, which I've been trying to tell you for fucking months. Which is that there is not going to be a red wave because Republicans have done nothing. They've done nothing. So no, I don't think he's had a defeatist attitude. He's told you the truth. Will people listen? No. No, they won't listen. They won't do anything. Ah, I see. All right, Fish Addict. I'm glad we're on the same page.
How we can support refugees. We are not Skittles, evil Skittles. You know, we're people, and it's been sort of tragic to see how we've moved from thinking about the plight when I was growing up and when my parents entered the country to now, which is like, you know, basically just like complete, like empathy, some empathy, to like a complete lack of empathy. Yeah, I guess that's my maybe parting note is like, solidarity. Please have solidarity with refugees.
I like that, solidarity. So we're getting emotion, structure, pivotal juncture, critical juncture, hope, solidarity. I come from rural Wisconsin, where we anticipated all of this with Joe McCarthy. And Joe McCarthy was elected in 1946. Wisconsinites knew that he was a horrible man doing incredibly destructive things. People were committing suicide because of what Joe McCarthy was doing. The threat, the calling them communists, even the possibility that all elements of these things that we're talking about, and immigrants, the assault on immigrants by McCarthy, anybody who would come from another country, threatened to be sent back. All this happened in 1952. Wisconsinites said, we got to stop this. And so they organized both at the grassroots and also in politics. And they tried to defeat Joe McCarthy, and he got reelected. In fact, he won by a substantial margin. And the newspaper that I worked for at that time closed its editorial off. It congratulated Dwight Eisenhower on being elected. It congratulated the Republican governor on being reelected. And it said at the close of the editorial, and to Joe McCarthy, a fight to the death. And, but yet it was a nightmarish moment. As I've watched this whole thing, I've remembered that reality again and again. My father and his friends who had fought McCarthy and failed. And 5 years later, McCarthy died in a bathroom drunk, a mess of a man. And in the special election that followed that, the first Democrat to be elected to the U.S. Senate from Wisconsin in more than a quarter century won. And the next year, Democrats, progressive Democrats to the left of the National Party, swept every office in the state and radically transformed it into what for a good long time was thought of as one of the most progressive places in the country. And I would only suggest to you that I think we have just been through a Joe McCarthy reelected moment. And it is a horrible, awful thing. And if it didn't make your stomach fall last night, and if it didn't make you feel a chill that you hadn't felt in a long time as regards politics, then I don't think you were maybe as engaged as you should have been, because something really bad happened. And the interesting thing about it is that I love our critical juncture, because I really do believe that when something really bad happens, we all come together in more numbers than will come from most post-election events ever, and to speak in depth and in all sorts of different ways, and to wrestle with this thing, not comfortably and not easily, but ultimately to get to the point where we will resolve that we will do what those people in Wisconsin did the day after they failed to defeat Joe McCarthy, which is that they said the next morning, let's have a meeting, let's go do something, let's start organizing. And within a relatively short amount of time, they had prevailed. And I believe that in a relatively short amount of time, we will prevail, because we're here tonight. Thank you to Verso for their wonderful work, to Andy and to everybody else. Thank you to our exquisite panel, people who actually showed their emotion and wrestled with issues in front of you, and sometimes didn't get to where they wanted to get to and struggled to do it. But
showed their emotion. I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't go that far.
After 2 hours of sleep. And a round of applause for all of them, please. These are wonderful people who gave you a lot of themselves.
Let's give a round of applause for Ken. Ken was the only redeeming part of that panel. Thank you, Ken, for giving us hope that
and
even
finally,
socialists can have good ideas sometimes.
This is a big deal. You were up all night last night and you came out.
All right, guys, I'm going to end it there. That seems like a good place to end it. Again, we were watching tonight a presentation on Verso Books YouTube channel that was posted on November 10th, 2016, with a group of legitimate socialists talking about how they're organizing against Trump 2 days after he got elected. Now, there were a lot of things that they said in this panel that did eventually make its way into reality. And that was the point for this. These people are winning. These people are driving the discussion. They are driving culture. They are driving the Overton window. Anyone who thinks that the woke left is not winning currently, or that is somehow being defeated, I'm sorry, that's just not true. Because the things that these people were saying in a random panel that was organized shoddily in a couple of days in response to Donald Trump being elected, those things, they are talking points. Not Ken. Ken is the good one. We like Ken. But the rest of them, their talking points currently are being parroted by the Democratic Party. They're being parroted on CNN. They're being parroted on MSNBC. They are winning. They're winning. And if you take nothing else away from Socialism Saturday and all of the great socialism content that we will be watching as the week unfolds, because I got I can't even show you guys. I got a playlist a mile long of videos I want to watch from legitimate socialists to see how they're changing the narrative and how they're driving the conversation. We're going to be doing that a lot on this channel because I'm going through a little bit of a phase. I don't know if you tell, where you're going to see a lot of pictures of me in a socialist hat. That is a good question. I do wonder where Ken is today. We know he's not working with the same organization that he started with, but I do wonder what he's doing today. That is a great question. Anyway, guys, it is 11:30 at night. Thank you for spending the evening with me. Cheers to you. Thank you for convincing me to drink Das Hydra because it is legitimately one of the greatest beers that I've ever had in my life. Really, more of a smoothie, not really a beer, but delicious nonetheless. All right, guys, please mount that like button on your way out the door. And remember, tomorrow, for those of you in my community, tomorrow is movie night in my supporter Discord. We are watching Demolition Man. We are starting at 8 o'clock. We're going to watch the movie. We're going to have a discussion about the movie. Demolition Man is one of the all-time greatest movies that has ever been made. If you have never seen Demolition Man before, today is a great day to start, or tomorrow is a great day to start, rather, at 8 p.m. in my supporter Discord. How do you get access to the supporter Discord? I'm glad you asked. There are several ways that you can get access to it, but it does involve supporting the work I'm doing financially in one way or another. If you head over to activelyunwoke.com/support, you will have, and let me just put this in the chat right now, just so you guys have the link. If you head over to activelyunwoke.com/support, you will have a variety of options available to you, to include becoming a monthly supporter on Patreon, anywhere between $5 a month to $250 a month, whatever's clever. They're all going to get you into the supporter Discord. You can get some great perks with the higher levels, but that's all right. If you don't want to go the higher levels, that's cool too. If you don't want to donate on Patreon, that's totally fine. I get it. They sometimes cancel people. You can join my locals community. Locals is $5 a month, $50 a year, or you can make a one-time gift, whatever works for you. All those options will get you in my supporter Discord. You can also join me as a paid supporter on Substack. So Substack, I do publish all my articles for free. But if you want to get access to that supporter Discord and movie night, you can become a paid supporter on there, $5 a month, $50 a year. I try to keep the options among all of them to be pretty consistent, so that you can join on whatever platform works for you, whatever platform feels the most comfortable for you. It doesn't really matter to me. And of course, you can join by funding my Indiegogo campaign. I want to train 10,000 parents how to find out what the schools are teaching their kids using publicly available information. I'm currently fundraising for that on Indiegogo. You can head over there to unwokearmy.com/parents. The link is also pinned to the top of the chat on YouTube, in the description below as well. And if you want to make a donation there, again, anywhere from $5 for a virtual high five all the way up to $1,000, for which I will get customized shawl support at, that will get you into the supporter Discord. I will be sending out the supporter Discord link tomorrow for everyone that signs up. So you got some time. I know it's 11:30 at night. Some of you guys want to go to bed, but you can still wake up, join us tomorrow, and then join us at 8 p.m. for movie night. We're doing movie night pretty regularly. Yep, September 11th, Demolition Man. So guys, I do hope to see you then. We're going to have a great discussion, and that's all I have for tonight. Thank you for joining me and hanging out, and we'll see you soon. Bye!